Chapter 644 Envy. Double chapters for my lovely readers. The living shall always fear the dead. Potima knew the meaning of those words, and through her desire for power, she understood the way humanity works too early in her early life as the imperial princess of the Cyrodiilic Empire. Excellence, that's a word that barely gave her justice. She was just supreme. A wild talent. A storm. An empress to be. Sadly, she was reduced to a queen in the far northern barren solitude. If that wasn't a plain exile, then they wouldn't have sent her to a place with such a name. Well, she was evil. A tiny flaw in her personality that will only cause the bloodiest civil war in the history of the Empire and scar it for generations to come. But as said, she knew how humanity works. She knew how to control them and bring them to their knees. Her method, as she described it, was the duality of hope and fear. Sadly, there is no single term to sum hope and fear together, since the language sees them as completely separate things, but in Potima's book, that was called power. Argue as you may, but hope and fear are two sides of the same coin that is held above all people by those who have power. Argue that hope is good and fear is evil, but then think about this: false hope and rational fear, what are they? Potima had those answers figured out before she reached 10, so it isn't of her concern if others would share opinions with her. By 14, she was already the Queen of Solitude and wife to the elderly King Mantiarco, who gave the, back then, Kingdom of Solitude to her total control. She was already a powerful magic caster, which hindered her ability to produce an heir until the age of 30. Her grandfather Emperor Auriel Septim II was dead by that time, so she named her son after him, and had high ambitions that her offspring would one day sit on the ruby throne. As her father Pelagius II was the emperor by then, he faced opposition to his rule and was assassinated by the Elder Council to open the door for Potima's elder brother, Antiochus, to be the emperor. History remembers Antiochus as the most scandalous emperor, and the history books are nearly pornographic in their depictions of life at the imperial court during the years of his reign. Potima, whose passion was for power, not fornication, was beyond rage every time she visited the imperial city. After 13 years, Potima would raise her son Auriel to rise in the stead of his dead father, and whispered to his ears her ambitions of the ruby throne. On the other hand, the emperor and the empress were so engrossed in fornication that the only recognized heir to the imperial throne was Princess Kintyra, whose lineage was doubted as the child of the empress and the captain of the imperial guards at best, if not the boy who cleans the cistern, according to Potima herself in her iconic speech in front of the Elder Council. She of course killed her brother before that speech and systematically assassinated all those who dared to call themselves of his blood. If any, Potima was an extreme fanatic of the purity of the dragon blood, as she tried to prove that hers is the last true dragon blood, which leaves her son as the most suitable heir to the ruby throne. Of course this wasn't completely true, since she had two younger brothers, Severus and Magnus Septim, who were more suitable than her son Auriel but had less support overall. Despite her efforts, however, Kintyra Septim II was declared empress. It was then, when the civil war broke out, the infamous War of the Red Diamond. Potima and her son Auriel lured Empress Kintyra II out of Cyrodiil into High Rock, as the Empress Breton allies betrayed her and locked her in a castle while her armies were slain east and west. Empress Kintyra died at some point, and the imperial city was finally opened to Potima and her son Auriel, who became Emperor Auriel Septim III. As for Kintyra, her death was most tragic, but she had no grave, so no one rallies under her name ever again. However, the date is confirmed to be the Day of Broken Diamonds. As for Potima, she enjoyed the position of the Empress Mother. Despite that, the War of the Red Diamond never came to an end, as the most unlikely participants were the ones to persist: Severus and Magnus Septim, who were supporting Empress Kintyra II. 4 years, the War of the Red Diamond kept going until Potima was 61 years of age, but she still led the army of the Empire herself, and chased the rebels across Tamriel. At that time, Severus Septim had an army in Hammerfell and Magnus Septim had an army in Skyrim. Potima returned to Skyrim and fought Magnus Septim until she cornered him, but during the battle that her son Emperor Auriel Septim III, who was supposed to be fighting the army of Severus Septim in Hammerfell, was defeated and captured by the enemy. Potima descended into rage and led the final assault against Magnus Septim and defeated him in order to return to Cyrodiil, but what she received was the news that the emperor was killed by the angry citizens of the imperial city as they lit the carriage that transported him ablaze on the way to his trial. It was at this moment when Potima couldn't contain her madness and started employing all the dark arts she knew in order to root out the new emperor Severus Septim I, whose declaration as the emperor enraged Potima to no end. She summoned Daedra to fight for her, had her necromancers resurrect her fallen enemies as undead warriors, and mounted attack after attack on the forces of Emperor Severus I. Her allies began leaving her as her madness grew, and her only companions were the zombies and skeletons she had amassed over the years. The kingdom of Solitude became a land of death. Stories of the ancient wolf queen being waited on by rotting skeletal chambermaids and holding war plans with vampiric generals terrified her subjects. At the age of 90, Solitude was besieged and Potima proved impossible to kill since she became something that was no longer a human by that time. To end her, the battle mages of the Empire weakened her enough to be able to put a seal on her body and separate it from her soul before sealing the body under the depth of solitude and the soul in the coldness of the mountains. While she lived, she had been the granddaughter of Emperor Auriel Septim II, daughter of Emperor Pelagius Septim II, aunt of the Empress Quintera Septim II, mother of Emperor Auriel III, and sister of the Emperor Antiochus and Emperor Severus. After her death, the new emperor was Magnus Septim and his son became Pelagius the Mad, also an emperor. In other words, every member of her goddamn family has an emperor from her forefathers to her brothers, son and even her niece, but Potima herself died a provincial queen. How would that make you feel? Potima? Screech. Sigh. Those undead just don't have any form of pleasantries. You break into their catacombs and they just come running at you without acting surprised. If I ever woke up from a slumber in such a cold day, this energetic, I'd have conquered the world by now. Those septims are just built different, man. While I was in my hasty exploration in the catacombs of Queen Potima under Solitude, I had to go through the biography of the Wolf Queen by Cater Araphanes one last time to see how the ancient queen reacts. It wasn't a good reaction, I say. To sum it up, the moment I stepped into these catacombs, the ghost of Wolf Queen Potima was already whispering all sorts of nonsense into my ears. Something like, "You've arrived at last. The hero who prevented me from being bound returns to my fold. And I have much to thank you for, little one. When you die I will raise you and you can take your place by my side. You'll serve me soon enough. And not much further. Come, little thing. Serve me in death. Bitch, I'm married. Have some decency." That was my final reaction before taking out the biography book and starting trash-talking Potima with its content. It's safe to say that she didn't appreciate it, especially that last part about everyone in her family being an emperor or an empress of some sort except for her. She's not liking it at all, goddamn. Those undead really bite bad. Well, I can at least see the ghost of the old bitch in the final boss room. You've come far, insolent mortal, but can you stand against my inner council? Let's see. This oval room had a lot of Draugr, the type that makes you feel bad for taking down since they can be considered historical discoveries, but those walking historical discoveries are greatly unappreciated in this world. This legion of undead was probably Potima's council and the necromancers who led her army of Daedra and undead. The ghost of the Wolf Queen herself was floating in the middle of this chamber gathering power for her resurrection. Still, she offered this power quite generously to the nearest Draugr council member in order to raise them. I appreciate the welcoming. I couldn't help but try my best to sound humble and upright. Kill him. Yet she was this rude. All right, I came here with a proposition, Queen Potima, I said as I bashed the head of that Draugr with the biography book. If you surrender to me, I'll make sure your remains aren't sacrificed to Arche. Yet she raised another Draugr. How rude. I guess the term sour bitch includes crazy she-wolves too. I had to bash the head of the other undead while taking a closer look at the ghost. The ego of Queen Potima was indeed active and displayed a very masterful manipulation of magicka and soul. She was reforming her astral body once again from bone to skin. I remember trying to reform an astral body a few times. The process was maddening. The best I could do was to copy an organ from another organ at that moment when Alina and I healed Julliner's eye. Truly admirable. I really wanted to watch and learn, but pride. Keep those sons of bitches from biting me, please. Now to focus on what we have in hand. A dangerous necromancer with a political agenda and a claim to the Ruby Throne trying to resurrect herself while there are dragons and a dragon cult attacking Solitude up there. Alright. Modern problems require modern solutions. I cracked my knuckles, my neck, and my back to be ready for this one. I needed power and concentration in order to complete the ritual of resurrecting the Wolf Queen successfully. And here it comes. John floated with his astral self into the influx of energy surrounding the ghost of the Wolf Queen. This battle required all of John's fragments to be on standby. Pride managed to get rid of all undead in the catacombs by blasting through them while flying around before returning to be on standby beside John and channel its energy to the main body. Greed and Nefertiti were already on standby beside the Blue Palace. Greed surrounded Nefertiti and her body as the two of them synced with John and channeled their energy. Wrath was in the middle of a fight in the city, and despite being a big pile of undead bones, it was famously known as the undead familiar used by John Dare, so no one complained about it. Still, the bone colossus stopped mid-fight, aimed its blade down, and went on standby as well. Lust was possessing Mirren by that time, and making him look like the Dragonborn. Lust's final form, Venus, separated itself from Mirren, who returned to his usual form while he was riding Zyko. He was being chased in the sky by the angry dragon priest when that happened, and the dragon priest couldn't fathom what was going on. Finally, Gluttony was greatly damaged when it used parts of itself to replace John's damaged organs, and so John put it on slumber since Gluttony is an insurance policy. In the energy influx, Queen Potima felt that her spell was being invaded by a skilled wizard, and no matter who she tried to shake off the control of the other wizard, he was overpowering her with multiple egos at once. As their astral forms collided, Potima's form that was corrupted by dark Daedric energy met John's golden draconic soul. Bit by bit, John's power devastated all the Daedric seals which kept Potima's soul active for those many years by letting his energy flow through her. What are you doing? Know your place. I am not yours to control. Surrounded by such a huge amount of magicka, the ghost of Queen Potima was akin to a person standing in the eye of the storm. She lost control of all this energy to John, and her Daedric essence was dispelled, meaning that her astral body can't longer exist in the mortal realm without a mortal body. Do you think I will submit? Potima asked with clear vexation, as she had no way to control anything in this tornado of magicka, and so John attacked her astral body with his palm, sending a large load of his energy in her. That felt wrong for some reason, but he still did it. The ghost of Queen Potima was blasted outside the magicka stream, and John's astral body returned to his physical body. Potima managed to control some magicka and put a necromantic seal on herself so her soul didn't just pass to the afterlife, but as she did, she noticed that there was a seal that had been established by John's own soul power. It is unfathomable if a human used their soul directly for any magical purpose, since it can greatly affect their lifespan, but that was way too absurd still. Catch her! It was then that John laid his trap. as the seal inside her resonated with his soul power. From the depth of his soul, 4 astral fire WRMs rushed out and caught Potima's astral body by biting her 4 limbs and disabling her from using any magic. No. Worthless mortal worm. Who do you think you are? I won't be trapped like this forever. Once my minions get their hands on you, they will peel the skin of your face. John walked into the last sealing chamber where the ghost of the queen was held by his fire WRMs, and he watched as she was lifted up to the ceiling while cursing and raging at him. "You're so untamable, aren't you?" John said as he looked up to her, then down to the ancient throne she had. "That's your seat of power?" John walked up to the old stone throne and found a skull lying on top of it. The skull had a beautiful crown-like ornament with a blue clear gem fixed on its front. "Humph!" John laughed before coating his hands with arcane energy and carefully holding up the skull. "This is what binds here. Your skull and a soul gem on top of it. Smart." He held the skull from its sides and linked his energy with the soul gem. Watching how he moved the head around, the head of the ghost moved exactly as he moved the skull. It also stopped cursing at him, and watched him with fear and worry. "If the legend is true, your father and mother killed a demonic werewolf, and trapped its soul in a soul gem, and made it into an ornament. After that, you were born, and your grandfather was recorded to have said that you have the eyes of a she-wolf ready to jump her prey. Don't mind me, I'm just rambling. Who are you?" It was then when Potima showed actual curiosity regarding him. "John Dare, a big fan," he replied. "You wish to see power, John Dare? You covet it? You want to reach beyond what a mortal man can?" asked the ghost of the Wolf Queen. "Ain't we all?" John replied. "But you, in particular, are more ambitious than even me in my prime. I can see it, I can feel it. You seek power to the point that your body is more magic than flesh. Truly remarkable." "That's so." "Yes. And the talent yours is beyond any mortal I've seen." "Thank you. It took me quite a while to cultivate it. But with your talent, I can turn you into the greatest mage that ever lived. I can. Divaith Fyr is the greatest mage that ever lived. He's my great-grandmaster." "Oh. Do you have any offers left before we proceed?" John laughed as Potima's offers were already nothing compared to what he has. "I hid many artifacts." "Pass." "The Imperial Throne." "Hard pass." "Damn mortal. You think you can play me as you want. I'll feast on your soul." "I applaud your patience." John sat on Potima's throne amidst her undying rage and held up her skull. "And your teeth too. Those pearls look very fine after hundreds of years. Damn, you're a psychopath for sure." John had his fun, and it was time to go serious. He took out a small silver knife and aimed it at the skull. Potima was greatly in discomfort, but she wasn't one to beg for her life. John started muttering words one after another and carefully carved a few runes on the sides of the skull. They were not composed of usual magical script or Daedric. They were Drovazal, dragon runes. John uttered the letters and the words as he completed a few lines to lay the foundation to his curse. "What are you doing?" Potima asked. "Do you know what a lich is?" John replied, and Potima didn't ask any more. "Well, it is not exactly a lich either." John continued to amuse himself while working. He then took out his personal mask, Krylon, and positioned it above the skull. With his fingers, he heated up the mask until the enchantment on it broke from the heat and the ebony mask started to redden. It was then that John put the mask on the skull and let them fuse together. "Pride, assemble one." John ordered his staff, and it started to roam through the catacombs gathering bones and body parts from the Draugr. Knowing the picky nature of Pride, it would only bring the best parts. The spell used was a normal assembly spell for an undead creature, but the carefully picked parts were refined and remade by Pride, as if every bone were printed by a master sculptor. "Your staff is possessed," the Wolf Queen said. "My pride and joy." John replied, which caused Pride to fly around and act haughtily. What game are you playing? The power game. John stood on the throne and reached the assembled undead lying on the ground. Per John's instructions, it was headless and had a hole in its chest. John installed a strange device in the hole and fixed it well before taking out a grim-looking object from the cube. A heart stone. Back in Solstheim, I met that 200-years-old Imperial who achieved some sort of pseudolife by transplanting a stone like this in place of his heart. I picked the best one I could find, filled with power from the heart of Lorcan. The heart of Lorcan. Wolf Queen, as I said, I am a big fan. I only brought you the best of the best. John then put the skull on top of the headless skeleton and made sure it fused. He then moved his hand over the skeleton and an ancient Nord robe with a wolf head mantle covered the skeleton. Covered the shoulders area, then the middle of the chest area, while moving down to the torso and ending just a little bit below with segmented steel. To an educated eye, this is a dragon priest attire. Please. John ordered the 4-fire WYRMS to bring down the astral body of the Wolf Queen and position it on top of the skeleton. The Queen made her dissatisfaction clear with a ton of curses and insult. Her features were still incomplete as she didn't finish reconstructing her astral body fully, but if John was to guess her appearance, it would be a Ciesi-like face from how twisted it got with anger. You think you can control me or turn me into a lich? Divaith FYR taught you nothing? Dream on, you moronic idiot. Dream on. At least do some research if you were this excellent of a wizard. I am of the dragon blood. You think that a soul like mine will submit to the spell of a lowlife mortal? Just you wait for me to get out of this and rip your throat out. Potima spared no insult and displayed her anger as John passively looked at her. He made sure her astral body was right on top of the body he created, and then he went down on one knee and called out 3 items that made Potima go silent in a second. On his hand appeared the gauntlet Wraithguard, on Wraithguard appeared the hammer Sunder, and on his other hand appeared the dagger Keening. The 3 legendary tools of Kagranak. Told you, best of the best just for you. John smiled and smote down the fire WYRM over the right arm. Life fades with hate. Then the left arm. Gold dims with monopoly. Then the right leg. Joy dies with misery. Then the left leg. Beauty rots with jealousy. When John smote every fire WYRM, which were the product of his soul power as a Dragonborn, the fire WYRMs fused themselves into the artificial body while maintaining control over the ghost of Queen Potima while shining brightly in a pattern. Each time, the ghost would wither in pain, but Potima was prideful and didn't break even with her 4 astral limbs sealed in the body. John replaced Sunder with Keening, then with the side of its blade. He pushed Potima's ghost down into the body and kept it there. Only her head remained out of the body in a final act of defiance. There is no point resisting, John said. You will never break the dragoness. Potima didn't even consider his advice. I see you are obsessed with the dragon blood, as every fool of you Septims, John said. The only dragons that were Septim were old Tiber Septim and young Martin Septim. You didn't even possess the true Devassos dragon blood. How dare! You are GK. John's tyrant aura defied logic and clutched over the face of the ghost. Without even the help of the dagger Keening, John pressed Potima's head into the skull and made a cut on his hand. Slowly, John gathered a bit of blood on his palm, and the blood crystallized with his magic. In a few seconds, the blood turned into a small bead of bright blood and hovered above John's hand as slowly John brought it above the heart stone. The blood and the heart stone touched, and as if they're made of the same thing all along, the blood disappeared in it. Badum. Badum. Badubadum. The astral body of the Wolf Queen and the undead body created by John fused together marvelously. Dust and dead ashes started to flow from everywhere in the catacomb to complete the body of Potima. John then chanted the ritual for his spell. The more he chants and the more words he utters, red cracks would grow from the heart stone carrying John's blood to every part of that body. The body started to shake as pain and screams were the first things ever known by it. Life fades with hate. Gold dims with monopoly. Joy dies with misery. Beauty rots with jealousy. For all succumb to envy, and envy walks away empty-handed, despised and empty. By you, I free myself from envy. The dust and the ash started to come together and reforge a body on the skeleton of Potima, just exactly like how it did with the ash spawns of Solstheim. The only difference is that this body was extremely refined, fitting the specs of Potima's astral body. As the ash and the dust settled, a motionless body was left on the ground with a face made of engraved ebony and ash and dust for its flesh. The red cracks faded away, and only the heart stone glowed faintly along with the 4 golden fire WRMS imprinted on the arm. The body showed no signs of moving, and remained like that for a few seconds before its opening with a burst of crimson aura. John merely raised 2 fingers up and the body floated as he commanded, with its legs, arms, and head dangling loose. As the body was fixed midair, consciousness kicked in and all the red cracks glowed once before fading again. John let loose of the body, and it descended to stand on its feet with perfect balance. The power of the blood of John Dare ran through every crack of that body, acting as energy channels, and the heart stone acted as a core. The stone remained glowing as all the cracks faded and the body looked up. The body is that of an undead, but it was conscious and had a very unique and strong ego. It clenched its fist and remembered the long-distant feeling of a physical body. But most importantly, it felt a power that was extremely familiar yet far superior to whatever it was like before. Dragon power. Dragon blood. Pure dragon soul and blood. Potima recognized it all and subconsciously put her fist above the heart stone and looked meaningfully at John before greeting him. Your Imperial Majesty. Envy, Dragonborn Priestess. Death Queen. Dread of Solitude. Wolf Queen Potima, Ego. Chapter 645, Turning the Tide. Your Imperial Majesty. There was no mistaking John for what he truly is, a Dragonborn. A mortal with the blood and soul of a dragon. For anyone else, it is impressive to be a Dragonborn. For a Septim, it is a whole different story. The Septims were the ones that carried the legacy of the Dragonborn emperors for many long years, as their ancestor was the Dragonborn conqueror, Tiber Septim. But long before Tiber Septim of the 3rd Dragonborn dynasty, there were Reman Cyrodiil of the 2nd dynasty and Saint Alessia of the 1st dynasty. Each of these 3 individuals created an empire that stood to last hundreds of years. If that man who just passed his blood to her is a Dragonborn, there is no mistake, he is the Emperor of Tamriel. Despite all that, Potima didn't bend the knee or lower her head. She wasn't even willing to act inferior despite knowing that she was under his control. Whatever. John looked at her and snorted before turning away. You chose to bind me for a reason, young Emperor. May I know why? Potima didn't seem to have been satisfied with his reaction, on the other hand, and demanded an explanation. Solitude is in danger and I need an army of undead. I can do it myself, but I also have the best necromancer in the world sleeping under this city. John said and kept walking. Solitude, Potima replied. My city. John could feel that Potima was a little bit emotional as she started to follow him step by step. Amazing! John exclaimed. What? Potima replied. Your ego is so clear. I never imagined it would be possible, but of all my sin artifacts, you are the only one that was perfected upon creation. A sin artifact? Is that what I am? Offended. I thought I would become some sort of undying minion or a lich. I feel like a lich and I should feel angry by it, but I don't. Well, you are a part of me now. An extension of my power with the ego of Wolf Queen Potima. That title, That offends me. Oh, excuse my rudeness, your ancient majesty. You're the emperor of this generation. I wouldn't act out of place with you. Well, I ain't no emperor, John said. Really? The first prince then? Heir to the ruby throne? But you wouldn't awaken the dragon blood within you unless you've lit the dragon fires at the temple of the One. Potima found it strange. God, you're ancient. John sighed. A lot has changed. The two took the back door from the catacombs to get out, and in 1 minute, John found the door leading out to the mountain behind Solitude. First, there are no dragon blood emperors remaining in this world. John opened the door and let the sunlight brighten the way out. Second, the Septim dynasty has fallen 200 years ago. It was a glorious fall, but a fall nonetheless. John took Potima out to the world, and from where they stood, they could see the entirety of Solitude and the battle taking place. Third, the dragons are back to the world, and it is my duty to prevent Alduin from ending the world as we know it. Kinda lackluster, but I am having fun nonetheless. Any questions? John's introduction of the world for resurrected people from the past is a terrible idea for a book. John himself is the worst tour guide to have, and Potima was lost for words. First order to envy. John cleared. Raise the dead cultists, kill the living ones, cooperate with Solitude's defense, then join me when it is over. Kinda ironic, right? 500 years ago, you were defending this city. 500 years later, you're doing the exact same thing. 500 years. And before I forget, Strun Bakuo. Rumble. John shouted the storm call shout in order to ward off the rays of sunlight and so the undead don't get damaged. Seeing the sky darken and the clouds thicken, Potima recognized the Thursdayum and felt amazed by its power. The art of the voice was something she is very familiar with and capable of practicing, but the situation was accelerating way too fast for her 500 years dulled senses. Wait, I need to know more. She wanted to say something, but John turned away. Later. He opened his hand, pride appeared, closed his hands, and teleported back to Solitude. Meanwhile, Envy was left on her own trying to ignite the power inside the new body she was given. With some attempts, she managed to cast a bound sword spell and conjured a Daedric flying creature. Let an ancient evil queen join the defense battle. John didn't see anything wrong with that at all. The sky darkened as lightning started flashing before it randomly picked a cultist every few seconds. The forces of the dragon cult managed to push deep into the city, reaching as far as Castle Dower and dropping many dead on the way. John descended first from the mountain, and the scene caused his face to stiffen. All he wanted was to prevent death and stop the war. He trained so hard for that. He rebuilt Winterhold for that. He trained a private army for that. He dominated the economy for that. He even played dirty and killed innocents for that. Each soul dies and goes to Sovngarde, feeds Alduin, and tonight he is feasting on thousands. Alina, John whispered quietly, tell me you're close. I can see Solitude, love. Alina replied telepathically, that's the second time in less than 3 days. How many did you bring? All of them. Fine. Love, there are ships coming from the sea. Friendly. Yes. Bearing the imperial colors. Then we only need to hold on. Rumble. The thunderstorm John brewed filled the sea with mist, and the rain started falling to wash the blood off the old walls. Envy landed behind John and looked around the city, where only corpses littered the street. It is as if the city just killed each other, Envy stated. Yes, John replied as he crouched down to close the eyes of a young imperial soldier who died with a blade in his hand. I failed to stop the dragons. Envy wasn't feeling sentimental by any means and slowly started to raise the dead dragon cultists per John's orders. Whenever a dozen were raised, she would send them deep into the city to disappear into the heavy mist. The legionaries and the Nords formed a defense line. The cultists' berserkers attacked with no fear and traded a kill for a kill in the name of Alduin. The dragons in the sky were circling with the storm and roaring. The first was preoccupied with Mirren and Zykel, the second was pushing against the battle mages, and the third was helping the cult advance. All this and that was just all too noisy. John had to stop all the sounds of fighting and focus on his own melody in this chaos. System, put on some music for me. Been a while. Playing. AC/DC Back in Black. You want a massacre, huh? John gathered all his sin artifacts at once place along with Nefertiti and Beth, who teleported on a nearby rooftop. Pride floated as its usual norm. Greed equipped John with the Lord's mail and the helm of the Dragonborn. Lust transformed him to the Dragonborn appearance. Gluttony fused itself with him. Wrath descended beside John and acted as his flank soldier, and finally envy, who lagged behind while raising dozens of zombie cultists. Hi-ya! John rushed in with a vigorous spirit, and the world in his vision shook as he broke through the morning mist and found his first cultist. The mammoth anchors were released and John battered his first victim, and a line of victims after him. He breathed in and shouted the elemental fury shout to make his attacks faster. He would hold the head of the cultist, and then smash it like an egg before finding another and stepping on him a few times to level him with the ground. A hole was created in the cult's formation, and the momentum of the defenders was restored, but the scenario where the dragons intervene whenever the cultists are pushed back would repeat itself. This time a dragon came down and flew along the main avenue as he avoided the battle mage's magic missiles, and then opened its maw to breathe out fire along the main avenue. Dragonborn, save us! The defenders shouted as they knew how many casualties would drop to this dragon breath, which they were projected to one time before. John was indeed ready to cast the largest magic ward he could, but as soon as he readied the runes, a sound was heard from the sky and numerous homing frost spikes lined the back of the dragon. "What do you think you're doing?" A voice of a beautiful crowned Valkyrie sounded in the sky as Griffin descended down towards the head of the dragon. The dragon barely recovered his balance, and was about to fly away, but the griffin landed on his head and attacked his eye with its talons. "Roar!" Alina commanded the griffin to open the wound further to open the way for the next attack. She had a passenger behind her who was more than willing to mess up that sound in ways nobody can imagine. Isha jumped off the griffin back with a frenzied cry and stabbed the dragon's eye socket with the spear of bitter mercy. The griffin disengaged with the dragon, and Alina flew off to attack the cultists on the roofs by freezing them with her magic, jumping down and parkouring through them with her twin blades, getting as many kills as she can, then jumping on her griffin again as it was biting the heads off a few cultists. Those women are nuts. Why is there a dragonborn to begin with? I'll never know. John laughed and threw the mammoth anchors at the dragon Isha was on to force him to land. John advanced to the dragon and took out the Daedric artifact weapon called the Ebony Blade. But on his way, Dragonborn! A dragon priest appeared. "Who are you?" John halted his steps and looked at the new foe. "You may not know who I am, but your death is." The dragon priest started a conversation, but John rolled his eyes back. "Pride." As John called, the elder staff launched itself like an arrow and headshot the dragon priest. One hit, one kill. Still, the body of that dragon priest dissolved rather than just falling dead. The dragon priest mask was especially standing out, especially with the hole that Pride made by passing through it. "You think you can kill me this easily?" The voice of the dragon priest reached John again as he heard it from the direction of the cultists. "Pride." John called Pride once again, and the staff moved like an arrow and dropped the dragon priest with a headshot. "You won't stop me!" Yet the dragon priest appeared once again, and without any order, Pride moved and dropped him down before curving and dropping the new emergence of that annoying dragon priest. Pride can kill this fucked up dragon priest as fast as he can return, but there are too many cultists. Envy. Start soul trapping all the dead enemies. The enemy uses vacant bodies by jumping through the masks they're all wearing. Artifacts are always powered by the magicka of the user, and taking them away wouldn't help, so the easiest thing to take away is to soul trap all of the enemies. Envy got her orders and knew it was time to fight directly. The undead queen started to radiate with power to the point where her original appearance as Potima Septim radiated over her physical body, Envy. She took to the sky above the cultists, and made a terrible noise that shook the core of their souls as she started to snatch their souls, living and dead. There was no stopping the undead queen, as she was just the dread of solitude. The appearance of Envy surely attracted attention, and will cause an uproar later, but John was satisfied with the result, and turned back to what he was doing. "Hey, honey!" John indeed turned back, but he saw Alina standing there right away, which instantly caused him to halt. "Hey, darling!" Alina replied, "Who's that?" Alina pointed at Envy. "Yes, that is my new artifact of envy," John replied. "Ah, she looks like a really nice lady," Alina remarked. "Pfft, she ain't." John made a silly smile and waved with his hand as if it's nothing. "She's just a 500-year-old undead." "That stopped you before?" Alina asked. "No, yikes. She's basically made of dead stuff," John retorted. "Isn't Venus of Lust 4,000 years old?" Alina asked. "You know what? I am not even justifying anything. You talk to her and you figure it out together," John said, and walked away with confidence. "We'll do that, Firemane." Alina watched as John walked away, which gave him chills and stress. Luckily, he had a dragon to pour this stress on. Back at the city gate, there was a fight going on between the dragon and Isha, who managed to wound him badly. "Die, flying lizard! Die, human worm!" Isha held her spear in the dragon's eye socket and tried to go deeper, but even the power of the spear of bitter mercy wasn't enough to take down a divine being such as a dragon. On the other hand, the dragon fought Isha but couldn't shout at her as she was avoiding his front, and couldn't shake off the spear since it was stuck in his skull. But this stalemate had to come to an end. "Glad to see the two of you getting along." John ran towards the dragon and cut his wing with the ebony blade. The dragon couldn't contain the pain and tried to flap away from John, but he was badly wounded. His failed attempt to retreat gave John the opening he needed and diagonally slashed the dragon's neck. Roar. "Isha, now!" "Got it!" Isha immediately untangled her spear from the eye socket and fixed her position under the dragon where John just attacked before driving her spear into the wound. The critical hit meant death for the dragon. The flesh of the dragon dissolved into energy. The energy flowed from the dragon to the Dragonborn, and he could hear the hums of Sovngarde shaking deep into his soul. John collected the dragon's skeleton immediately and was about to look for the remaining dragons before he was faced with the tip of Isha's spear to his face. "Don't teleport my honey boo into a battle like this again without asking me," Isha said. "Seriously, woman. Miran is a man, he can take care of himself," John wanted to complain. "No, he can't. He's clumsy and softy. Unless I am in a fight, he's not allowed to fight." Isha didn't back down. "God, what kind of stupid shoujo fiction did you two come out from?" John couldn't believe what he heard. "It's called, I love my soft and squishy husband so much and I always want to protect and pamper him, but his friends are being a bad influence and they shall face their end at the tip of my spear." Barf. John was already on his knees from the pain of his stomach churning. "Woohoo!" As the two had their argument about Miran, a certain familiar Daedric Titan flew above their heads with a certain familiar high elf riding its back and shooting down some pursuing enemy. The Daedric Titan Zykel and his rider Miran Aldmarai had a dog fight with two dragons and caused them to go in circles. Miran's masterful marksmanship kept the two dragons at bay as Zykel circled the sky aimlessly. "Bad influence!" Isha shouted at John and wanted to run and save Miran, but John stopped her. "Don't worry. It is now over." "What?" "Look." John pointed at the sky and the direction where Zykel and Miran were flying to. The dragons pursued them relentlessly, but as they reached the heavy mist above the sea, Cicero made an aerial maneuver in the open sky and started flying the other way, which disturbed the dragons' flight as they needed to adjust their speed. The reason Cicero could do that was that he has 4 limbs, and so he used them to bounce off something. That thing wasn't detected by the dragons yet, but as soon as they entered the mist, they crashed with their faces into a wall. Hundreds of chained harpoons flew off the mist and penetrated the bodies of the 2 dragons mercilessly at the sight of all people. The 2 dragons shouted and their worshipping cultists screamed with anger, but there was no saving them. A red-haired man appeared in the sky holding a chain and spare harpoon as he slowly advanced midair, but what followed him was an unbelievable sight. An island floating in the sky. Thousands of dare troopers and members of the Firemain clan all stood on the edges of the floating island with chains and harpoons. John's domain, the floating island of the Golden Dragon Palace, emerged to the world for the first time in history. The reinforcements jumped off the island as they climbed down the chains and joined the fight in the city. The cultists stood no chance when their dragon lords were captured and their wills were broken. They started to run and escape immediately. They left everything that would hinder them down and broke loose into running. The city gate was open and the road was clear, except that it wasn't. The Imperial Legion was on the gate, and leading them was an elderly man on a white horse. Emperor Titus Mede II. Chapter 646 Crisis Lifted. The Imperial Vanguard Cavalry led the charge in the City of Solitude, and the defensive forces chased the retreating cultists. The Firemain clan members and the Dare Mercenary Corps landed from the floating island and assisted the defenders. The battle was over and the Siege of Solitude concluded in a matter of minutes with this grand finale. The Emperor of Cyrodiil was a brute of a man with a menacing look in his eyes. He was riding a horse and waving a greatsword left and right as if it was nothing. Once the cultists were cornered in the Market of Solitude, he descended off his horse with his royal guards and started chopping off the cultists 3 and 4 at a swing. During the mess and when nobody was looking, John changed his look back to his usual rather than being the Dragonborn and joined the frontline chopping cultists as well. When all concluded and when only one struggling cultist was left, the Emperor punched the last cultist, which sent him towards John. John slashed the cultist's torso without cutting the man in half, but made him drop to the ground. John kicked the cultist back to the Emperor, but held his neck up at his sword's edge. The Emperor approached slowly and looked at John with a confident smile before raising his sword and executing the cultist per John's generous offer. The sword fell and the head was severed from its body in a merciless bloody scene. With that, the defenders cheered for the hard-earned victory and for the glory of the Empire. The Emperor looked around and felt proud as he dragged his greatsword up again before resting it straight on the ground. For that, all the cheers stopped and in a single unison, everyone knelt to the Emperor. Not everyone, as when John was about to bend the knee, the Emperor reached for his shoulder. The old Emperor was a man whose hair has mostly receded back and started balding with age, but he still kept a large goatee beard of mostly white hair. His eyes were that of a warlord, but despite his ferocious looking, he had a deep wisdom in his eyes which John couldn't measure. "Old friend, Johnrad," the Emperor called. John looked back half surprised and half disgusted, making his expressions strange. "I am," John wanted to say something but the Emperor interrupted. "Not Johnrad." The Emperor realized, John Hild Johnradson. The Emperor looked around and noticed many tall redheads in the crowd, but Johnrad was not present. Actually, he spotted who could be Johnrad, but that man hid away in an alley, which made the Emperor put on a sorrowful face. He then turned to John and signaled for the crowd to rise. "I see you are twice the good man I heard of." The Emperor spoke to John with a smile. "This fills me with pride, Your Majesty," John said. "Let us have a proper talk later then. The city needs to function and my presence shall hinder everything. Be well, John Dare." the Emperor said, and walked off with his guards that kept staring at John. "Thank you, Your Majesty." John nodded and backed away respectfully. He had to show proper respect for the man that kept this crumbling empire together for many years and won the Great War. False emperor! False and mortal! He is no emperor! He is not of the dragon blood. John heard the whispers of envy, and looked up to see that Envy was on top of Castle Dower eyeing down the Emperor who was being escorted in. John sighed in his heart and raised his right hand towards Envy. Immediately, Envy was moved off her place as if pulled by John towards him. The moment she reached him, she was only an ornate skull covered with ebony metal and resting on his hands. Envy has two forms: the Dragonborn priestess form and the skull form that was initially Potima's skull. In both forms, Envy is immensely powerful, but now she's not on autopilot. Your Majesty, how is this mortal an emperor? He can't be an emperor without the dragon blood. He can't be an emperor without the amulet of kings. Envy spoke to John, but no one heard it since it was telepathic. As I said for the 100th time, I am no emperor, there's no dragon blood emperors anymore, and the bloody amulet of kings was shattered by the last remaining septim. John replied with his mind as well. The amulet shattered? Envy became shaken as this was almost impossible in her mind. Yes, a Daedric invasion happened. The last septim heroically sacrificed his ass to summon Akatosh and beat down Maroon's Dagon. All things considered, the septims died out and there is no concept of dragon blood emperors anymore. Akatosh sealed the rift between Mundus and Oblivion, and we all live happily in the Fourth Era. Fourth Era. Year 202. John took on Potima with no mercy, which caused the ancient lich to remain silent for the time being. He was about to start dealing with the aftermath of the situation from his side, but he was immediately stopped by General Tullius and a score of Legion soldiers. Thane John. General, we thank you greatly for this assistance with defending Solitude. The general paid John his due respect. That was my duty. However, the general cleared his voice as he watched John's expressions carefully. You have entered Solitude with a score of your men who fight under your banner. This is serious aggression towards Solitude. We're pulling out, General Tullius, John replied, slowly. Pulling out too fast is bad and painful, we just need to take our breath then pull out. John had to make it awkward, and so the general felt beyond annoyed. Thank you again. The general spoke, then about that floating island in the sky. What island? John asked. Over there. The general pointed towards the location of the floating island outside the city. There's no island in the sky, General. Islands fly nowadays? John asked. The general had the urge to shout at John, but after the way he was treated by the Emperor, the general had to pile it on with the rest of his stressful burdens. Over there, behind the sea mist. The general pointed. Oh. That it is no floating island, General. John shamelessly denied. It is not? The general tilted his head slightly. Nope. That, sir, is a big-ass portal. What you're seeing is Winterhold, but the portal is big and in the sky, so it looks like a land that is in the sky, except that it is not a land in the sky. The general looked to the battle mages on his left and right, and they all looked puzzled. There is a large magical reading, but it is completely different from what portals give. In theory, portals can't be that big. A battlemage said. Have you seen the portals made by the forces of Daedra above the Imperial Palace 1,000 years ago? John asked. No. The battlemage replied. What do the records say about them? John asked. That they were so large that they would swallow the entire Imperial city in one go. The battlemage replied in a daze as. Yeah, imagine. John said, have a nice day, gents. John wanted to leave quietly, but a rude fellow punched him in the gut. Ha! That's my nephew. The man passed by John and stopped in front of General Tullius. Tullius, Haven't seen ya in 20 years, you old grumpy fuck. The man said with contempt. Tyr fucking Firemane. General Tullius looked at Tyr Firemane and spat on the ground, still showing off your battle scars, acting all brave and shit? I have a lot more now. You soft milk drinking folk from the strategic office are always as smooth as a baby's butt. Watch it, Firemane, you're a war hero alright, but to me, you're still that little spy from the blade. See that, John? Your old uncle here used to bully him when he was still a tactician officer, and now he's all general and shit. Tyr called John. You two have fun reuniting, old people. John had to move on and finish the mess left for him. John returned to the Golden Dragon Isle, and absorbed the remaining 2 dragons that were lying dead in chains. If a dragon was killed before the Dragonborn gets to him, that dragons would remain until either another dragon absorbs or revives him. These dragons were the last of the secret dragon horde. Unless Alduin revives more dragons, the only dragon left in that division is the one called Lotsovengen, the leader of the horde. Sadly, Lotsovengen is not the kind of dragon that plays a fair game. He was the one John found in the sky before the day of the battle, and the dragon didn't even try to fight John head-on. Unlike the wise dragon's horde's leader Onakindrog, whom John spared, Lotsovengen is a devout of Alduin and seemed like a tactician rather than a fighter. But John was nothing if not a schemer at heart. Nefertiti, how was it? John asked. The cat stepped out of John's shadow and rubbed her body against his leg before sitting down and yawning. Human, making me work so much is bad for my health, she replied. I hope you didn't turn lazy as you did last time with Serana, John said as he tickled the cat's neck. She purred a bit while closing her eyes before replying. At least, she was nice and let me sleep unlike a certain human, she replied. John stopped tickling her neck, carried her up, and started shaking her around. No, jerk human, don't. Nefertiti bit John's hand to escape him before turning into her human form. You miss my hair. Is it done or not? John asked. It is done, Nefertiti said before hugging his leg again. Now, gimme food. John rolled his eyes and waved his hand a little before a plate of specially made tuna appeared before her. She took it right away and went running. God, girls are so tiresome to raise, John said with a warm smile, but soon Beth came to his vision holding a staff twice her size. Not you, though. Thank you, teacher. How is the thing I told you to do for me? John asked her. It is going well. Nothing outside of the expectations, she replied as she showed him a magic crystal from her pocket. In the reflection of the crystal, John could see various parts of the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. Keep watching the situation and report to me again tonight. John patted her head and let her join Nefertiti to play. John was currently looking down Solitude from his floating island, which was enshrouded within an artificial mist. I don't understand. It was then when a skull spoke to him. John took out the skull and reshaped it to take the humanoid form of Envy. It was strangely resembling an elderly woman with sharp features, but rather than an evil face, she seemed dejected. I have time on my hands, so, ask away, Queen Potima, John said. You possess power, an army, most likely a kingdom of your own, she said. I'm not a king, I'm a businessman. I am also not a jarl or a prince, I am just a thane in Winterhold. A thane? Winterhold? The barren wizard land? Potima asked. The northern paradise, John retorted. Your ambition is too small for one with the dragon blood, for a true dragonborn, Potima said. Ah, here we go again. John smiled. Don't worry about my ambition. I just see things from a different perspective. What is a greater perspective than lording over the entire Tamriel? She asked. You see that city down there? John said and pointed to Solitude. Everyone and their mothers in that city owes me money. John then walked a little bit to the east and pointed. Mordhal owes me money. Then he pointed south. Whiterun owes me money, then East, Windhelm owes me money. Falkreath owes me money. Dawnstar owes me money. Even Markarth can't stand on its own with its silver mines and owes me money. Only Rift End has been resisting so far, and they are economically in a shitty situation, and once Maven is dealt with, they will owe me a shit ton of money. The sun reached the apex in the sky and the entire Skyrim was revealed behind John. I own this place all right, John said. See that emperor down there? He's having it rough. You had it rough too, with a treacherous palace and scheming councilmen on every corner. John added. So your power comes from money? The imperial family has endless coffers. Potima said. Not money. Success. You see, an empire is on the top of the food chain where there is no imagination left, no more going up, no more evolving. If you come to the top, one day you have to get down because life is not a mountain to climb, it is a road to walk. If you get to the highest point you can see, you will have to get down at some point. John smiled and aimed his sword forward. But if you don't look for the highest point but rather keep taking the road ahead, and keeping this trail of success going, you won't reach an end. You'll just meet new challenges and either conquer them or learn from them. I walk that road to the end of me. John had a conviction that no power is eternal and no road leads to the top, since the top is nothing but an illusion. It is the journey that is the prize, not the destination. Potima looked at John and remained silent before saying, Then for you, I lived a life that is nothing but a waste of air, she said. Sadly. John agreed, but you're one of the 3 women I find most fascinating in this world, after my wife, of course, and my mother's. Never thought I would witness that day of being a historical figure. Potima mocked. Who are the other 2 women? Aside from the legendary Wolf Queen of Solitude, I think the Lady of Mercy Almalexia and the Mother Queen of Mournhold Berenzia to be the most fascinating 3. The living goddess and the old hag. More like the dead goddess and the most awesome grandma in the freaking world. Almalexia is dead. 200 years ago, along with the rest of the tribunal. I'll recommend a few books, John said nonchalantly, but as he finished his words, a tick was heard around him. Ah. Now to round 2. John became excited. What's that? Potima asked. I asked my kitty cat to put a tracking shadow on that annoying dragon priest you were fighting. We have found the hideout of the final dragon. Chapter 647 Lost in Time. With the epic failure that is the Siege of Solitude, the situation on the dragon cult's end was definitely chaotic. The Wise Dragon's horde was defeated not too long ago, and the secret dragon horde is now on the run. They were extremely sure that they could have destroyed Solitude and gave the Stormcloak a great advantage to reignite the civil war, but they lost 4 dragons in one day. Lotsovengen, the leader of the secret dragon horde and one of those who were resurrected by Alduin, was contemplating on that failure and how to recover from it. Recently, Alduin has been gathering enough energy to resurrect new dragons and grow stronger, but the rate of how many dragons were falling to the Dragonborn was almost the same. The attack on Solitude was made with the intention of devastating Solitude the same way Lotsovengen knew in the past. Back in the day during the Dragon War in the First Era, the dragons would send their agents to assassinate the chieftain of a certain tribe, which is by default its main pillar of strength. 4,000 years later, the situation seemed the same to some of the old dragons, and so they went after Jarl Elisif. But many variables happened. First, Jarl Elisif died too soon when the plan to attack Solitude was still premature. There was a chance that the curse would work too soon, but this was even sooner than expected. The cult had to take the initiative and attack while the city was dazed thanks to the situation of the bloody wedding. Second, there was a different power controlling Solitude, and that was the Empire. The dragon cult has gained enough information to understand the whole situation with the Empire, and its foundation, which was founded long after the death of many dragons and the banishment of Alduin. Still, the complicated political climate rendered the death of Jarl Elisif useless. Third, the existence of the Nord warlord John Dare, who sponsors the Dragonborn. Knowing that the Dragonborn is located in Winterhold and moves around Skyrim by a network of portals according to the most recent dragon sightings, the dragon cult made an alliance with a wizard that was able to disturb any teleportation attempt between Winterhold and Solitude. While this plan worked, the Dragonborn still appeared somehow, and hand in hand with John Dare, they dropped 4 dragons in one battle. Epic as this failure may be, the aftermath was nothing but a pain in the ass for all who are involved. My lord, your servant, Nalat, kneels before you. Some of the few who survived were Lotsovenjan, who didn't participate in the fight, Nalat, who could easily escape, and a small score of cultists, around 200. This marks the loss of 3,000 cult members and 1,000 allies from the Reachmen known as the Forsworn. Most of the brothers who died in our ranks were killed in battle. This guarantees their departure to Sovngarde, my lord. As for the enemies, we killed almost twice what we lost, so that makes a total of 9,000 souls sent to Lord Alduin. Nalat reported to the silent dragon standing on top of a lofty ancient word wall. Yet despite my best efforts, John Dare didn't die. It wasn't just Lotsovenjan and Nalat in this place though, there were 2 others who were dressed in heavy cloaks, and the one that spoke just now was Maven Blackbriar. It is a surprise how he survived. I can't help but feel dejected too. Messner added. Nalat, who was just kneeling to Lotsovenjan, raised his head and stared coldly at the 2. What exactly are you trying to say with those words of yours? He asked. You boasted to me about the dragon's ability to do reconnaissance. We expected information that could help us eliminate John Dare, and what we got was a disappointment on all fronts. Maven complained, I risked a lot by hiding your sabotaging force in the city. You promised me that John Dare wouldn't be able to escape. Show respect, human. The dragon priest lashed back. I want that man dead just as much as you do. He killed everyone I know 3 years ago, and he is the force behind the Dragonborn. And wasn't killing him your wizard's duty? Isn't that incompetence on your part? Don't you shift the blame on us. Maven replied, You said that John Dare wouldn't receive any assistance, that he was away from all his allies, and that the attack we used would be sufficient to kill him. And I am sick of you complaining. All right, Sarah. This is enough. Messner interfered to stop Maven and Nalat from squabbling more than this before he turned to the dragon. As the actual leader of the dragon horde, we would like to hear your opinion, Honorable Lot Soven Gain. The dragon was surely silent with 3 mortals on the throat of each other. He looked between the 3 and lamented. For the first time, Lotsovenjan spoke in a draconic deep voice. A human, an elf, an undead. 3 of you failed to kill 1 Jor, 1 mortal. The warlord lives not because we did not isolate him or attack him with enough power. The warlord lives because he is Silkrenik. Lotsovenjan's words didn't mean anything to Maven or Messner, but Nalat thought deeply. Soul broken? Nalat asked but didn't understand. Soul divided. Yet a reply came, not from any of the 4, but from a portal that silently opened in the vicinity of this place. John Dare walked out with Envy, who seemed to be the one who cast the portal. You! Everyone around was stunned by his appearance save for the dragon. Messner was the most shocked since he didn't expect John to be this sneaky. Drem Yal Lok, greetings. You must be Lotsovenjan. John spoke. Dovakian, the dragon replied. What? And the 3 were for another round of shock. You were followed by a strange scent, Nalat. Lotsovenjan explained. But, Lord, I have fought Dovakian, that human isn't. Nalat couldn't believe what he heard, but things started to make more and less sense at the same time. As long as the true face of the Dragonborn is veiled in mystery and rumors, Anyone can be a Dragonborn. Of course I must be there to make sure dragons die properly and absorb their souls," John said with a grin. Now with his identity revealed to them it means that he isn't planning to let them live with that secret. "What does it mean?" At that time, Messner asked. "A soul divided, you said. Soul energy tends to replenish itself but always stays under control and never really vanishes unless returned to etherius via death. Binding a part of your living soul to an object that fits it will always anchor your original soul to its actual body. With enough anchors, your soul shall always be in your astral form to the end of its natural lifespan without being killed. Since the anchors always bind and keep the soul working," Messner said, "meaning that, my attack it worked against you and really killed you. Correct?" John nodded. "You came the closest to killing my physical body, but as my astral body never really dies and my physical body always heals. It is some sort of pseudo-immortality." John was even kind enough to explain it all to them. "The four of them aren't really surviving this." "Incredible!" Messner applauded John's genius, "but that works only in theory. I have some well-kept secrets, of course." John smiled and made a hush gesture. "Many in the old days knew your ways." Lotsovengen spoke, "On old Dovanor, Akavir, and old Atmara. Yuvan Vith, the golden serpents, sealed their heroes in their blades, so they rise again with new wielders. Od Hoxii, snow demons, did the same, but soon they forgot how when they forgot their mare ancestors. I surely love to hear more about Akavir and Atmara from a person who witnessed them. However, I copied my methods based on the rituals of the three god-kings of Morrowind. Your kind was eradicated from Skyrim before those three even appeared," John said. The word three god-kings of Morrowind seemed to have irritated Messner a bit, which John managed to catch. A Dunmare with dwarven prosthetics?" John wondered. "You are a citizen of Clockwork City by any chance?" "That's none of your business." Messner became more irritated once John brought up that name. "Fine, you'll all die anyway. Envy," John said and rushed towards the dragon priest Nalat first, while Envy charged towards Maven and Messner. "Get away!" Messner fended off Envy with a ward spell, but she wasn't aiming for him from the start. As Envy got to Maven, she held her from the neck and used her ability Dread of Solitude on Maven. "No!" Messner was a second too late as Envy started to absorb something from Maven as if she was sucking out her soul. Messner blasted Envy away, but she levitated and hovered over them ready to strike. As Messner held up the collapsed Maven, he found that she looks as if she has aged 30 years, with her face becoming gray and wrinkled and her hair ashen white. He fended off Envy again and looked at the others to see that John had caught Dragon Priest Nalat and impaled him on a greatsword. Meanwhile, the dragon Lotsovengen flew off and retreated from the fight. "How?" Nalat couldn't believe that he was dying to John Dare this easily. "I figured out you were a Forsworn," John said. "That's why I kept talking until my agents eradicate all the remaining force that you might transfer yourself to. It seemed I wasn't the only one playing with soul magic around." John made sure to soul trap the body of Nalat and recover the dragon priest mask intact. "That is a shame. I quite wanted to experiment on that." The augur spoke through the system. "This one is a bust," John replied. To the usually silent augur, the dragon priest Nalat was a very special case. It can be that Nalat is the nearest existence there is to the augur, as it was a soul attached to many artifacts and preserved a very excellent grade of intelligence after death. This sort of ego is quite common, though. They escaped. Envy approached John as she was fixing her arm that seemed to have been damaged in her fight against Messner. "At least Maven is down. I will personally visit Riften to get rid of them, but I need to get that dragon first." John cracked the Nalat mask and eradicated the soul within before taking to the sky and flying towards where he senses Lotsovengen to be. The dragon was not in the sky and John had to clear all the weather in order to look clearly. Still, the dragon didn't seem to have used magic to teleport. John looked around and looked really well, but he couldn't find a trace, so he had to do this the brute way of leaving no stone unturned. The dragon is naturally a creature with a strong aptitude to magic, thus sensing their magic is always easy. Sadly, sensing normal and dormant magicka in a large radius is never easy to achieve since. Found him. I'm awesome. John managed to feel the magicka of the dragon, as it seems to have fluctuated a little bit more than it should. The dragon was attempting to do something, but now that John is on him, there's no way he escapes cleanly. Nope. That won't do well at all. But John couldn't find any dragon where he landed. Rather, he found the ever-peaceful town of Dragonbridge. But this raised too many questions in John's head all at the same time. For starters, why is nobody panicking, or at least some woman running around and screaming "dragon" in a Nord accent? It felt wrong on many levels. John had to disguise himself and walk into the town. The people were still on edge from every coming and going stranger, since the attack of the dragon cult is still fresh news around here. Seeing a man walking in, an Imperial patrol felt like exercising their power to question him, but as they approached him, he pointed to the insignia on the armor he was wearing, and it showed the Imperial dragon. His appearance didn't give off the character of a legionary, but seeing him wearing a Nord horned helm, the legionaries immediately remembered the rumors of the Dragonborn. "Sir, by any chance are you?" the legionary asked, but John glared at him to shut up since he was focusing. The glare carried an intimidating sensation of magicka to it, and the legionaries felt fear right away. As John passed them, however, they could speak and breathe again. "Phew! By Azura, my heart was about to blow up again," said the first Imperial legionary. "Yeah, just like that officer from a while ago," said the second Imperial legionary. John heard what they said and frowned immediately. An officer? A legion officer? Can it be? Currently, John could notice 7 individuals who fit the description. 1 in the tavern, 3 in front of the security office, 2 doing patrols, and 1 standing over the dragon bridge and watching the river flow. The last one was especially large, and may be taller than John. A true freak of nature. As the man stood watching the river, he could feel a wind gust nearby as another man rushed at a speed unimaginable for a human and stood there facing him with a sword in hand. "You're a hard man to shake off, Jor," the Imperial legionary said. "It's Dovahkian for you, Dova," John replied. "Mr. Dovahkian would make me more pleased, though. A few months ago, when I heard Alduin's voice in my bones and life flowed back in me, it felt almost impossible when I found out that he was intending to fulfill his destiny and eat the world. He seemed to me like he was done playing games and ruling over mortals. It is ancient history to you, but to him, this whole war started less than a year ago. We all slumbered due to our brief death, then, 4,000 years, just like that. You know, it feels like yesterday when I witnessed this bridge being built in my honor. I looked down on you, Jor, but you're just as immortal as we are, just in a different way." Lotsovenjan touched the stones of the bridge with his bare human hands and smirked. His nails and teeth weren't human despite his fantastic human form. "You're a piece of work yourself. I never knew you would take the appearance of a mortal just to try and escape me," John said. "Back in the day, destroying you was rather easy. Kill their leaders, the rest fall in line. For 1,000 years can make your perspective of dealing with things very inefficient. For example, I thought killing the queen would bring the city to chaos as it just started a war by killing the king. But it didn't work that way. You killed the queen to make things get in order. You united the mortals, put us in the position of guilt, and bested our plan. Once that queen died, I knew I was doing it all wrong. This is not the era of dragons anymore, and we are playing a game we don't know its rules. Alduin led us into yet another folly." You're used to this. Heh. Lotsovengen smirked. You have no idea. Davenor, Akavir, was the best time of our lives until he decided to eat the great four. Yuvan Vith, the golden serpents, didn't like what we did to their mother, so we were hunted, our kin slaughtered and eaten, and on their corpses, the Sifim was built and the eternal war erupted. Never to this day did it ever end. Sifim? Eternal war? John lost Lotsovengen there for a moment. That's on Davenor? The war where, if it ends, they would rally towards Tamriel next? Indeed. The tragedy of the Four Kingdoms. But in Tamriel, you never expect that after 400 years the world will remain puzzling. I always wondered what's on the other side of this lousy dream. John looked closely at Lotsovengen and frowned, but in a split of a second, Lotsovengen turned to him with his mouth wide and his eyes turning draconic. The Thursdayum was just on the tip of his tongue. But the dragon's head went flying with one strike of the blade. John immediately held the body and threw it off the bridge before the transformation is cancelled. The headless body of a dragon shocked the people of Dragonbridge village, and they all could see the man standing on the edge of the bridge, holding a dragon's head from its horn that dangled off the cliff. The dragon's body dissolved into strands of divine energy and flew to encase the Dragonborn with their power as the dragon's body turned into bones. The age has turned long ago, old-timer, John said. What will remain is always legacy. John said these words, then left the dragon's skull on Dragonbridge, the entrance of Hafingar, as a sign of killing the last aggressor on this hold. Chapter 648 Recipe for Disaster. I was out of town for the past couple of days, so take this 2 and 1 double chapters. All the best. This chapter also has some past reveals. Buckle up. Part 1. And for my first order as the Jarl of Solitude, I hereby appoint John Hild Firemane, known to the public as John Dare, a Thane of Hafingar with all the rights to operate as a first-class law-enforcing official in this realm. The second who will gain this title is the Dragonborn, whose name shall be withheld from the public due to security reasons. May the light of the Divine bless you all and bless Hafingar. Jarl Breiling of Solitude made the speech on the gates of the Blue Palace after she put her sword to rest and carried a hammer to fix the palace's broken gate. She was still with the hammer in her hand when a message came from the Elder Council that she was recommended for the seat of Jarl and was approved by the Emperor immediately. Breiling kneeled before the imperial decree, issued John's title of a Thane, then turned back to hammer the dent on the gate as if nothing happened. John heard the news when he was on the dockyard overseeing the business reopening of the East Empire Trading Company office. This time, the company officers were waiting for his orders to start running their business. I guess my work here is done. Behind him, Thane Brina Marilis stood with still the same look in her eyes. I guess so, John said. She was here taking a boat back to Dawnstar when she ran into John. Strange enough, this woman would rather headbutt than avoid him. It is a shame. You can stay here and be of good use to Breiling. John couldn't help but smear his salt. She is an upright woman, much more than I can ever be. Sadly, she is delusional like the rest of them. Brina said. You hate me this much? John asked. Because you are by no means upright. You are not a bad person, John Dare. I know that well, or you would have never succeeded. But you don't care about the small people beneath. Is that so? John asked. Last I checked, Winterhold doesn't even have slums, and Dawnstar's situation is just because someone is being as stubborn as an old goat. You see it wrong, Brina said. What you see is that so long they work under you, it is all fine. Tell me, John Dare, can I just be a small person, go into Winterhold, buy a shop, and run a smithy? If you... Before you answer, no one can, Brina said, because no one can rival the Dare Industries, a workshop that houses 70 smithing experts and makes them work with machines and tools, not a random smith can even acquire. Not even the great Ireland Greymane with a legendary forge can hold a candle to the Dare Industries anymore. Brina continued, not even Arcadia, the healer alchemist of Whiterun, is as good as the Dare pharmacy. No mercenary in Skyrim is better equipped than a Dare Corp mercenary. Not a single merchant is as fast as a Dare ship or a Dare caravan. Then they start losing business and fall into debt before they run around to who? To you, John Dare. You give them money, own half their business, and call it investment, then all of a sudden, they just fall in love with you again. You see why, John Dare? My methods of helping people are flawed? John asked. No, they are almost flawless. So flawless you start missing the flaws that we were used to. When was the last time I saw two blacksmiths competing with each other over whose craft is better, or two alchemists pranking each other with their brews? Where did that spirit go? Now they all work to meet your supply and demand ratios with soulless eyes and pockets full of your gold, and something tells me you know what I am talking about too well. Then she left on a longboat that was conveniently setting off just as she got in. I do know it too damn well. John sighed and sat on a crate watching the sea. Never mind her, son. But John Rad was there already, drinking and offering his son a bottle. All you've done was push those people forward to have better lives. Heh. John smiled. What are you up to? Nothing. John Rad replied. Think of it as drinking with an old friend I don't really want to see. John Rad raised his bottle towards the Emperor's ship sitting at the mouth of the river. Any chance his first name is Titus? John asked. Yeah. Used to work for him. You know how it ended. John Rad said. He called me John Rad when he saw me and I couldn't help but feel my stomach, John said. Even John Rad made that face. The two turned around and spat in the river. God, I must have looked horrible when I was young. God, I must have had my face smeared with shit in the fight. Joe. Jornad. A drunken Nord man walked to him. Dame. I see, 4 of you now. That's a drinking buddy of mine I just met. John Rad introduced. His name is... I don't remember. Hans Fuckbeard or something similar, I dunno anymore. That's an Argonian name, John said. The only thing you take after me, son, is your tolerant attitude with other races. Old John praised young John. John pushed the drunken man away with a stick into a boat and the man went to sleep. Whatever, John said. So old comrades are bringing you down here just to drink with the drunken sailors. It is a custom to drink for 3 days after surviving a battle, boy. John Rad said. Thank goodness it is ending tonight then. And I don't get drunk anymore. John said and threw the bottle away. That woman frustrated you, huh? John Rad asked. Well, you know how it goes. I hate those memories. What memories? Past life. You used to brag about them. I still do. I just don't like bad ones. Bad ones. Being a powerless man, not being able to make a difference, everything is planned for me to do, hating that I'm worth nothing and my fate is in the hands of someone stronger, richer, and sleeps with enough women to make a pimp cry from jealousy. Now you're bragging. John Rad chuckled. But after that illusion realm you created for your past life, I see that it is too much for a person to bear sometimes. Too much in life you just forget it was all once this simple. Yeah. It seems I made too much progress and it upsets some people. But your past was a low-ranking law person. You didn't have the blood of your father like you have now or your family. I'm not talking about being a lawyer, John said. I was talking about the exact thing you said after it. John Rad found his son's words puzzling for the first time. I became a lawyer out of my rebellion against a father, John said. He was my father all right, but he was no family. It was almost the first time John talked in detail about his past self. A father, but not family. Yeah, me and him with a big-ass house and endless money. I just had to follow everything I was told. Be the perfect fiddle, John said. It is like I am getting to know about you for the first time, John Rad said. So you experienced life as a privileged child. Why did you turn out to be a poor wuss? That takes us to the woman who was supposed to be my mother. How so? Let's just say that having two mothers in this life is probably a compensation from the heavens, since I never knew who she was. You made the drink taste like shit now, Jonrad said. It always does. I know that I am your father, boy, no doubt. But to the other you in there, that man may have been your father, but he was never your daddy, Jonrad said in a state of drunken pride. You know what? I'm just too tired to lay the itchy curse on you, John said and walked away. Wait, itchy curse, the other day that was you? John didn't listen and walked away fast, but Nefertiti appeared before him. Something happened, Homan, she said. All right. John crouched down, take me there. The two disappeared via teleporting, and after they did, a bottle was smashed at where John stood. Damn you, stupid lawyer son. You lawyers always make people feel itchy, bring shame upon your ancestors. Oblivion takes you all. Part 2. Master, you said that the future should unfold this way. But it didn't. Beth offered John a timeline of her monitoring operation. This is strange. That's why I asked Nefertiti to tell you. Good job, girls. Can we go play now? Nefertiti asked as she jumped on the paper at John's hand. Beth, you can have a break until tomorrow. And you kitty cat will also take a break before we can head out. John passed Nefertiti to Beth and started to compare his information with the report. The Dark Brotherhood is John's next playground, but it seemed that the unexpected happened. In the game, after taking the contract on the Emperor's head from Amand Modier, the player has to kill 3 figures in order to approach the Emperor. First, Vittoria Vici, the Emperor's cousin. Once she gets butchered in her wedding, the Emperor will be obliged to attend her funeral. Second, Gaius Maro, son of Commander Maro of the Imperial Secret Service and head of the Emperor's security. By killing him and planting false evidence on his body, the Emperor will understand that the attempt was failed, alienate Commander Maro, whose son is a traitor, and have a fake sense of peace as his assassination attempt was already foiled. Third, the Gourmet, an enigmatic cook whose skills are second to none on Tamriel. This man was supposed to cook for the Emperor by his request. Once the cook is killed, the assassin will pose as the cook and poison the Emperor. The problem doesn't lie in any of the 3 but between the second and the third. Once the player is done with the second, a situation will occur in the sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood where the Keeper of the Night Mother, the jester called Cicero, will attempt to attack the leader of the sanctuary, Astrid, and injures the assassin Viezra instead. After that happens, the player will have to chase after Cicero all the way to Dawnstar and deal with him. The player then takes the 3rd kill on their hit list. But what went wrong was the fact that Cicero didn't do anything. Meaning that unlike the game, this Cicero behaved out of line, and Serana, the one posing as the listener, proceeded to the 3rd kill and isn't too far from the Gourmet's location. The Gourmet must live. John immediately donned greed as a cloak, called all his artifacts from around the Golden Dragon Isle, and opened a portal to the Nightgate village. Serana's signal wasn't too far to the west and John had to deal with things before she would do anything. He walked immediately to the Nightgate Inn and looked around the place. Huh. You're here, Captain? The voice of an old man reacted to John's appearance in the inn. Old Fultheim, I am the son, not the father. I told you last time to go visit the Dare Pharma and get your sight checked. Bah. A brat with an attitude, said Fultheim, who is a regular at the Nightgate Inn and a friend to John's parents, as well as the one who delivered him to Riften when he was about 1 year old along with Hilda. Chapter 3. Old man, a quick question. John walked in the empty and started pouring some oatmeal in a plate before putting it in front of Fultheim. You didn't happen to see an orc lodging in this inn? Seems like a rich guy. Yeah, he takes the room in the cellar for some weird reason. He is out picking herbs, so wait for him. Fultheim said. I would love to, but I have to get to him before the others do. We'll tell father you said hey. John pushed himself up and left. Suit yourself. John hurried out and looked around the roadside in order to find the gourmet who is an orc. The place seemed empty, so he utilized a spell to look for the man in question, and there he was. But he wasn't alone. There, John could see a man talking to the gourmet, and the two were very engrossed in their conversation. But for how much longer? The orc asked. I have long since run out of ingredients to experiment on. Master Balagog, we promise you it will be within a week at the very most. This will help you establish your goals as well as ours. The other man replied, who seemed to be a Breton after a further inspection. You people approached me with this proposition first. I really appreciate your patronage, but I have a lot to get done, and this barren wasteland has nothing left to offer. If you don't come to me in 1 week, I will leave for Solitude right away. The orc raised his tone. I understand. Please, meet us in Solitude after 6 days to give us time to prepare. If you go to Winterhold, you can take a fast ship to Solitude from there, the Breton said. I see. Be on your way then. The orc agreed at the end. This conversation was between the gourmet and an agent of an imperial faction. John guessed the agent should either be a member of the Penitus Oculatus or one of Amand Modier's men. In any case, John waited for the orc to start heading back to the Nightgate Inn. On the road to the inn, John sat on a stone and had a bowl of green soup on his left hand. In his right, he carried a piece of bread that he would dip in the soup and eat from in supreme ecstasy. That is an interesting smell, my friend. And the terrifying voice of an orc woke John from his dream. Yes, it is. John opened his eyes peacefully and agreed with the orc. Are you sharing? The orc asked. Always. John nodded. John offered a loaf of bread to the orc, who sat beside him and dipped it in the soup bowl just as John did. I like the spices, and the main ingredient leaves a strong breath too, a bit southern. Jute mellows. I see, finely diced. Pretty rare outside Cyrodiil and Valenwood. The orc nodded. It had garlic and was made in chicken broth. Indeed. I prefer more broth than the usual recipe though. John said, salt, pepper, and vegetable oil to finish this spell. Simple yet marvelous. I say the secret is in the broth. The orc said. Damn right. John laughed. Normally people use beef and chicken broth, but nothing can rival a rabbit broth. Do you happen to be the gourmet by any chance? Ha 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 ha. The orc laughed loudly. No. That's you, silly. Ha 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 ha. John laughed harder and clapped hands with the orc. Then the two stared at each other with their smiles disappearing. Damn. The orc said and offered a handshake. I am not supposed to reveal this, but you can call me Balagog Gronalub. Nice to meet. John shook hands with Balagog. And you are? You can call me Daedric Prince of all cuisines, John said. Ah. People call me John Dare. Aha. The John Dare? Balagog asked. Am I that famous? John asked before laughing it off. Yes, I am. Well, it is an honor to finally meet you, sir. I truly didn't imagine a dish this fine to originate from the freezing north. You mean this Malokia? No, it doesn't originate from here. Nords have no taste buds last time I checked. Wow. So true. Neither do orcs, sadly. You and I are kindred souls in this harsh world, Balagog. So where does this Malokia originate from? Heaven. And does heaven have a name or an address? Heard of Egypt before? No. That's that then. Well, Lord John Dare, it was a pleasure, Balagog the gourmet said and stood up. If you excuse me. Are you going to cook for the Emperor? John asked. The orc froze for a second before turning towards John. I don't know what you're talking about, sir, Balagog replied. If you stay here, the Emperor's enemies will try and get to you, John said. I made sure that my identity is a secret, my lord. Well, that until you found me. But I am sure I am of no use to someone like you. Balagog insisted. I know. You are of no use to the point where even only your contact knows your actual identity. And so, any man can claim that they are the gourmet if they have your identity papers, which of course you keep as a secret. What are you saying, sir? I am saying that they will kill you, impersonate your identity, and poison His Imperial Majesty Titus Mede too, John said. That's... Balagog felt heavy in his heart and looked wary at John, then at the bowl he was holding. What? John felt offended. Why would I poison you? I want to save the Emperor, you dolt. John swallowed the soup in one go and threw the bowl. You need to run, and I am here to help you get away. An asset such as yourself is too valuable to die here. John said. I can't. Balagog said. Why not? John stood up. Because, for my dream to come true, I need the Emperor, Balagog said. What dream? John asked. As you already know, I am the gourmet and I am an Orsimer, Balagog said. People would assume the gourmet is a Bosmer or even a Breton, but an orc, that would be impossible. So in order to prove myself and my cooking, I need the Emperor to recognize who I am, and from there, no one will look down on me because of my race. No one expects an orc to be a cook, but an orc that cooked for the Emperor, that's a different story. So your secret identity isn't because you're a mystery junkie, but just a confidence issue. Confidence? You can kill me, but you better not insult me. I've learned to cook in the most prestigious kitchens in Eldenroot. My confidence can reach the throat of the world. It is people that need to stop with their stereotypes and know that anyone can cook. An Argonian, a Nord, an Orc, a Rat, or even a Dunmer. Well, let's not go that far with Dunmer. Yeah, you're right, but I need to build a reputation first, then gain support to open the best restaurant in the Imperial City. Balagog Gronalb seemed to have a lofty goal that even John can't ignore. So no matter what killer is coming, I can't back down here. I see, so, you want a hype master then? John asked. A what? A professional hustler, an advertising manager, a popularity campaign, John explained. What's that? Balagog asked. That, my friend, is a very serious business that I personally do. If you allow me to accompany you to Winterhold, you will have the greatest showman in Tamriel hustling for your restaurant. John joined interlocked arms with Balagog Gronalb and led him towards Winterhold. Historians recorded that in a few years of this meeting, the chain restaurants of BFC, Balagog's Flavors Cuisine, became one of the most successful Tamriel-wide businesses associated with the Dare investment plan. Its symbol, the gentlemanly smiling orc, has become so widespread that most orcs were always stereotyped as natural chefs. Serana was well aware that the man who was standing in front of the Nightgate Inn's entrance was John, the person who has been moving her strings for a while now. She expected to see him soon, especially after the situation in Solitude, but the latest rumor about him saving the city from a dragon cult attack was everywhere. Also, he seemed like he was waving for her, even though she made sure to never reveal herself yet. You seem angry at me? John spoke from a distance, but with her heightened senses, Serana could hear him as if they were standing next to each other. Serana walked at a normal pace to John, and as she reached him, she looked at him and seemed greatly displeased. I have been doing Astrid's biddings for long enough, she said. True. John nodded. I came for you to stop my father. I know what you're doing is important, and there are dragons and the Emperor's life is on the line, but I didn't sign up to do any of this. Serana stated. And? He asked. I want out, she said. Seeing the look on John's face change and him walking towards her, Serana didn't really fear him but couldn't predict what he would do. Will you be satisfied if I come with you and finish this once and for all? John asked. I don't want to interrupt whatever important business you have going on. I know you are a Dragonborn and you managed to obtain 2 Elder Scrolls. I also know that you can protect yourself from my father, but he will keep coming. I know. John nodded. Then? Are you letting me go? Have I ever held you against your will, Serana? John asked. You could have walked away long ago, and the time you spent among the assassins surely have served you well. You are no longer helpless or needing help. You are beautiful, lethal, resourceful, and powerful. You could have walked away long ago. But you wouldn't let me. John felt that Serana was having another inner struggle and denying her own ability to proceed on her own if she wanted to. Let me ask you about that woman of yours, the one that used to be an assassin. Serana spoke. Psycho? Did she do anything to you? John asked. She planted my face to the ground when we ran into each other in Riften once. Serana then asked, That was you sending her after me, wasn't it? It wasn't, John denied. To be honest, I lost a great deal of trust in your words since that night. Serana said. I am actually not surprised you ran into each other. Jelinar oversees my interests in the Thieves' Guild in Riften, and she picked up the hobby of hunting vampires for the Dawn Guard. But this is my first time hearing that you two ran into each other before Solitude. John said, On the other hand, you seem to have been doing problems, cute little fangs. Psycho wouldn't have targeted you unless you showed your nature as a vampire and left a witness. Serana couldn't say anything since John wasn't wrong. How about this to restore trust between us? John smiled. I'll drop off whatever I'm doing and go deal with the Dark Brotherhood situation together. John's made Serana extremely worried with his proposition, but if he is finally planning on taking his role as the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, she has nothing to complain about. And so, the plan of assassinating the Emperor started to go in a clear motion. Chapter 649 Dear Cicero. Is it Eid? Is it holiday? No. But it is another 2 and 1 chapter. My hands hurt. I should divide those chapters into 2 from now on. Part 1. While the situation was unfolding in Solitude, Whiterun was having its troubles going on, and the one who was in the spotlight was John's sworn brother, Wulfr. Wulfr has joined the Companions and moved to Breezehome Manor in Whiterun to keep an eye on things. In the notes that John gave him, there were many secrets and future events that made Wulfr not know how to think about it all. John said that Wulfr can either save Codlac Whitemane from an assassination attempt launched by the Silver Hand werewolf hunters or leave Codlac to die, which will open the door for him to be the harbinger of the Companions. The problem was that this attack will happen when Wulfr leaves to slay the Glenmeril witches per Codlac's request, and John doesn't know how to stop it from happening unless Wulfr convinces some of the Companions to protect Codlac personally. For that, Wulfr could only turn to Ela the Huntress, but her reaction wasn't anything special since she didn't imagine that some bandits like the Silver Hand would find it easy to break into Whiterun and make trouble with the entire body of the Companions. It took Wulfr 4 days to travel to where the Glenmeril witches were, kill them all, and return to Whiterun. The whole process was done at the fastest speed he could achieve, but just as John foretold, the Companions were attacked and Codlac Whitemane was killed. Wulfr wasn't the kind to get attached to many people, but Codlac was a good old man whose honor was known across Skyrim. Seeing the old man stabbed and torn with the red of his blood mixing with the white of his hair made Wulfr silent and sad. Codlac, I am sorry. Ela was the one to first get on her knees and cry over Codlac's body. Farkas and Vilkas were in grief, and Skjor swore vengeance and headed off. Let us move the old man somewhere else. Wulfr asked Ela, who nodded and started going behind Codlac's head to hold him from his shoulders. You don't need to. Farkas and I will. Vilkas wanted to carry Codlac instead of Ela since she was overcome with emotions, but she shook him off her shoulder with a violent jolt and waited for Farkas to carry Codlac in front of her. Vilkas made sure that Ela and Farkas put Codlac's body on the biggest table and rested his axe in his hand. Meanwhile, Wulfr approached Vilkas. I've brought the heads of the witches Codlac wanted, Wulfr said. That should wait. This ritual must be done later. Vilkas said. The more we wait, the longer his soul stays in the hunting grounds of Herson. That's not what he wanted. Wolfer said. Then you know how this ritual is done? Vilkas asked. I do. Wolfer nodded. I see, Vilkas nodded. We can't bury him before getting vengeance. Ela said, Wolfer, you will come with me. Wolfer looked closely at Ela as she walked away fuming with vengeance. He turned to Vilkas and asked, Where is Skjor? I don't know. He just left and nobody could stop him. Vilkas replied. This is bad. Wolfer didn't feel good about this situation. Originally, Skjor was supposed to die in the fight with the Silver Hand earlier than Kodlak, but because Wolfer refused to turn into a werewolf like the rest of the members of the Companions' inner circle, this situation wasn't triggered. Wolfer headed out immediately and looked for Ela. When he found her, she was already readying her sword. Where is Skjor? Wolfer asked her. We're going after him, Ela replied. He heard of a location where the Silver Hands are hiding and he's out for blood. What location? Gallows Rock. A man there called Krev the Skinner is an old-time enemy of our kind. Skjor wants his head. Shit. Let's go. Wolfer and Ela headed out to Gallows Rock where Skjor should be. From the notes John left, this location is where Skjor may die. John and Surana traveled together through the woods of Falkreath for the first time in a few months. John was cloaked and hooded like the creepiest person on Nirn, and Surana's eyes were glowing in the dark like the second creepiest person on Nirn. What? I just had a word with my brother. Things seem to have diverted from the original plan again, John said. Surana looked at him and wondered how many plots can one man keep running all at the same time. Can you give me some advice? Surana asked. What? John paid attention to her sudden question. The way you do things, how often do things go wrong? Well, all the time. John couldn't help but let out a burst of strong laughter. Surana never expected this answer at all, since in her eyes, John was always the meticulous mastermind and the resourceful guy who knows his way around every problem. So, what do you intend to do with the Dark Brotherhood? Surana asked. John looked around the wood of Falkreath before deciding to reply. Astrid is hungry for power. She will try to get rid of you, who she thinks is the listener, so she can remain in control of the sanctuary. Her little scheme is futile though, since I am the real listener, John said very proudly. Surana narrowed her eyes before shrugging her shoulders, saying whatever, and following him along the woods. But the assassins still won't listen to you. They don't know who you are and they have no intention to trust a stranger over Astrid, Surana said. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that if I were you, John said. Back in the day, the Dark Brotherhood used to have a lot of traitors. Some caused great damage to the Order that they needed to perform a purification on whole sanctuaries sometimes. Purification? Like purging them all? Surana asked. Exactly. If the Black Hand suspects one traitor to be hiding within a certain sanctuary and they pose a great danger to the entire Order, purging the bad stock would be better than infecting the whole field, John replied. But there are no fields anymore and all the stock is in one barn. You burn it and you have nothing left, Surana said. How so? John smiled. I have you. You know I don't intend to be your listener substitute forever. I need to get my business done on my own, Surana said. Well, in that case, we have him too, John said nonchalantly. Him? Surana asked. Oh. Your senses are so dull. John immediately moved his hand and broke a tree trunk. Squeak. Once he pulled his hand out, a figure of a man came out of the trunk and flew over as John flung him across the woods. John and Surana walked to the poor fellow, who landed badly on his back, and he saw the creepiest pair on Nirn looking down on him. In truth, his appearance can count him as the third creepiest person on Nirn. Hello, Cicero, John spoke in a sinister deep voice. Part 2. LL Listener. Lord Listener. Oh yes, dear Cicero. Can you please put me down? Oh, poor Cicero, can I though? John wondered dramatically. Well, of course, you are the listener, Cicero said cheesily. You truly can't keep a gentleman like myself in an entertained mood, John complained. What use of you as a jester if you can't hold your ground being hanged upside down? The problem is, I am lacking any ground to hold at the moment, listener. Don't get too smart with me, my dear. John flicked Cicero's forehead. Truth of the matter, dear listener. Poor Cicero is not that good of a jester. He can be a servant, he can be a fool, but never could he jiggle balls or stand on ropes. Heh. You can jiggle blades just fine. John laughed unintentionally. Dear Cicero, no need to fear. I have only been testing you, but it seems you are a true servant worthy of praise. Your devotion, your sense of duty, and your incredible care of our mother all these years truly touched your little brother's heart. Truly? Oh, listener, how wonderful! You witnessed, you knew. Cicero was all alone, all lonely, but there was mother with me, and she never spoke. Oh, dear mother, she must be lonely now, she must be waiting. Listener, please, let me down so we can go and see her. Cicero spoke and whined. Of course, but you have to convince me first, Cicero. Convince me that I can put my trust in you, dear brother. John approached Cicero, but the latter couldn't see John's face under the cover of greed. I will. Cicero will prove himself to the listener, all for our sweet mother. Brother. Cicero spoke, and Serana rolled her eyes from drama poisoning. You please me, Cicero. You truly do. John said in obvious ecstasy. Now tell me, how did you hold your urge in and didn't attack Astrid even though you know the rotten greed inside her? What do you mean? Cicero started to hesitate before answering. Oh, Cicero, my dear, you are breaking my little fragile heart. John turned around and put his hand on his head in an artistic pose of melodrama. Serana, who was sitting by the fire, watched the two madmen and couldn't help but be amused with the performance John gave, so she started to pick up nuts and crack them with her fangs in harmony with the crackling firewood. As for Cicero, who was tied by a magic rope and hanging upside down from a tree, he was having very eerie vibes about John. Dear Cicero, please be truthful, your answer means the world to me. John said and repeated his question very seriously this time. You hate Astrid for the traitor she is, and you could have taken many swings at her lately. Why didn't you? What stopped you? In John's mind, very important questions were running around. First, Cicero the mad jester should have attacked Astrid before Serana would go after the gourmet. This would lead Serana to hunt him down before going after the gourmet. However, Cicero didn't act against Astrid even though she keeps undermining the authority of the listener and the Night Mother all the time. On the other hand, Wulfar reported to John that Codlac Whitemane had died despite the warnings they tried to give the companions. Moreover, Scjor of the companions was supposed to die in the same quest when the player becomes a werewolf and joins the circle, but as Wulfar didn't accept to be a werewolf, Scjor didn't die. Still, once Codlac was killed, Scjor headed off to the place he was supposed to die in order to avenge Codlac and will probably end up dying. Somehow, John hasn't figured out the formula of how to save people who were supposed to die in the game from dying. In the case of Wulfar, he killed Sibby Blackbriar and it worked. In the case of King Torrig, he tried to warn him from facing Ulfric unprepared, but Torrig died. In the case of Vittoria Vici, he entered her life and tore her marriage apart before faking her death, and it worked. But that all depended on luck. So is it luck or fate that decides things? Why does the future feel like it is set in stone sometimes? And why doesn't it feel like that the other times? So dear Cicero, why didn't you do it? John asked. Cicero wanted to. Cicero always felt like doing so, O listener. Astrid always hated us. Cicero, that vampire, the listener, and our mother. Cicero said, but I knew there was something. Cicero knew. He can always tell that the vampire wasn't listening. The listener must be favored by the Night Mother, but she didn't act that way. She felt like lying but told words that are true, Cicero said before reciting the unholy words. Darkness rises when silence dies. Both John and Cicero spoke the words. Yes, the words. You say them but you actually know what they are, but the vampire didn't understand them. I was fooled like Astrid and the rest, but I realized. Realized what? That the listener is walking among us in shadows. That he sees us and we cannot see him and whispers words to his speaker. That he knows everything. Cicero said, the Night Mother may not speak to me but she shows me signs, and those signs were many. I could hear them, walking, trotting, snoring, yawning, scratching, watching, and growling. John and Serana narrowed their eyes and looked at each other before raising their indexes as if they realized what Cicero was talking about at the same time. Hissing and purring sometimes? Serana asked. Yes, sometimes, Cicero confirmed. I think I know what he's talking about, Serana said. Right? John held his head as there was no use for Cicero anymore. With a swift swing, John cut off the rope tying Cicero and let the jester fall down on his back. Cicero landed with an expression of pain on his face, but he hurried up and freed himself quickly. Listener. Oh listener, thank you dearly, Cicero said as he groveled to John's feet, but what is it? What is it that Cicero felt? What is that he heard? I was always trying to listen but the signs were never as clear as before. I can't believe it. Serana held her head. Is it the unholy sweet maiden, the Night Mother? Did Cicero hear her signs correctly at last? It was a cat, you dumb moron, Serana said. He uses a cat familiar to infiltrate the sanctuary. That's what you always have been hearing. A cat. Cicero heard a cat? The cat was the sign? By oblivion! You stupid? Serana didn't take shit from Cicero and cuss it at him. A round of banter and madness started between Cicero and Serana while John sat alone thinking. Cicero was led to believe by his wild imagination that there are signs of the Night Mother going in the sanctuary, while it was just Nefertiti when he sent her out to communicate with Serana and spy on the assassins. Nefertiti usually values her privacy and doesn't seek attention, but she is usually playful. However, once she sticks to the shadows, it is very difficult to spot her by someone who isn't trained in shadow magic, which is a lost art. On the other hand, Cicero is a complete nutjob. He spent years hiding in Dawnstar's sanctuary and talking to a corpse. While that would just be regular lunacy, he was always close to the influence of the Night Mother. His stealth and overall aptitude as an assassin are top-notch without relying on anything magical. John himself is not that good at stealth without relying on magic. Dark senses. Cicero has acquired something akin to that, but that still doesn't mean anything to John. What he wanted to know is how Cicero diverted from the main storyline without major interference from John, while the companions didn't divert that much with John's direct interference through Wulfur. Possibility? Future? Fate? Law of causality? I can't figure it out, John said. Serana and Cicero looked at him with questioning faces. Nothing, John said. My growth is stuck again, and I think the answer lies somewhere around a certain topic. It is not a problem now, but I'll need a long break later to organize my thoughts. Break? Serana asked, how long? Not sure, John replied, but for the time being, I'll act based on the things I know. John cracked his fingers and chased the noisy thoughts away. Let's focus on purifying the Dark Brotherhood for now, John said. All right. Serana was happy to finally rid herself of those pesky assassins. Oh listener, Cicero wishes to punish every last one of them. Please, allow me to be your hands and feet. Cicero said. Fine. But how can you trust me, Cicero? John asked. Listener. Cicero doesn't need to trust you. Cicero only needs to perform his duties as the keeper. The listener as well must keep to his duties. If any of us fail with that, trust will be the least of our problems. Cicero said in a menacing smile. John sighed, then turned to Serana. And you, I'll offer you an opportunity, John said. I'm listening, Serana replied. The Dark Brotherhood may be nothing now, but it is a group that has a lot of power when managed properly. They may not be much compared to the Fokihar clan, but you will get many benefits if you have any personal agenda you need to be done. John offered. I prefer independence, Serana said, and our promise to stop my father didn't include that. True. John nodded, but at the end of the day, you are a daughter of Kaldharbor. If Molag Bal decides to use his influence on you, you will be nothing but a plaything that he can track and control as he wishes. Serana made a dejected face, since bringing up Molag Bal's control over her was something she wasn't that much proud of. I mean, if your father asks any of Molag's servants to capture you, it will only be a matter of time, John said, but if you put yourself under the influence of another patron, the Night Mother. No, Sithis, John said. Sithis never limited the freedom of anyone since his chaos requires absolute freedom. On the other hand, his retirement plan is an eternity of darkness compared to Molag's entirety of servitude. I had my fair share of both darkness and servitude, Serana said. However, this time it will be on your terms, John added. Following Sithis is much better than being subject to Molag Bal in John's opinion. However, oblivion is one thing, Aetherius is another, and Sithis is a whole different subject. Choosing between an afterlife of complete slumber within the domain of Sithis or choosing an afterlife of servitude as a subject of Molag Bal. Just to get away from Molag Bal, I will try this path to Sithis for now. Serana decided to take the 7-day free trial option. All right, John replied. Now, to the most important subject. The reason why the Dark Brotherhood hasn't been functioning properly is there is no Black Hand. What are they exactly? Serana asked. Oh dear, for you to not even know the basics, Cicero said. Cicero will educate you, vampire. Just the ruling council of the Dark Brotherhood, John said, consists of a listener and 4 speakers who represent the thumb and the other 4 fingers respectively. I, the listener, am the thumb. Serana, you can be the index finger. And Cicero, my liege. Cicero bowed. You are the keeper of the Night Mother, but because there are many vacant spots in the Black Hand, you will be the little finger. By your orders. Cicero lives and dies for the Night Mother. Cicero seemed actually very happy with the promotion. As every finger has a claw, each of you can have one personal assassin as your arms and legs. They will be your silencers, so pick them carefully and keep their identities to yourself and those you trust. I have my own silencer decided, John said. I'll recruit someone I have been keeping my eyes on, Serana said. And Cicero will pick one after the purification is complete, Cicero said. Great. John stood up and asked, Serana, I believe that Astrid gave you a spellbook. Have you taken a look at it? Yes. Serana handed over the book. She said that this spell was one of the last things she could salvage from the last Brotherhood hideout. It summons a spectral assassin from the void of Sithis. I summoned the guy, but he creeped me out. John opened the book, memorized the spell, then passed it to Cicero. Learn it. Yes, listener. Cicero understands. John kept muttering the words and skillfully cast the spell in a few minutes. There was no void when this conjuration happened. It was as if the void itself was forming something from nothing. A summon from outside the realms of known reality. Nerina would beat John up if he doesn't hand it to her for study. But that wasn't the case for now. The summon which formed in front of the group was taking the form of a ghost, yet with a very vivid look in his eyes and an outstanding ego in his behavior. The ghost walked out with confidence towards the campfire where the three gathered. "I live. Again." John smiled as he finally met a soul that goes back to the events 200 years ago. The man who guided the champion of Cyrodiil when he was but a mortal assassin. The legendary Lucien Lachance. Chapter 650 Greed's Final Form. "So, the listener, what is he like?" Cicero asked. "You really want to know?" Serana replied with a question. Of course, Cicero wishes to, unless that is something he is not supposed to learn. Cicero gave a smart reply. "Well, I doubt he will keep his true identity a secret for long, but make sure to never cross him if you want to live. I haven't spent a lot of time in the outside world myself, but judging from the monsters I know, he doesn't lose to any of them." Serana replied. "Then, are there any plans we must follow as fellow speakers?" Cicero asked. All the plans are running in his head. The question I've been meaning to ask is, why did you give him your trust when it is just the first time you meet him? Serana questioned. "Oh." Cicero heard him say he is the listener. "Of course that's not all, Cicero is no fool. Not that kind of fool anyway." Cicero replied, "Aren't you a vampire? Can't you smell?" "Smell what?" Serana asked. "Death." Cicero replied, "Death, life, and rebirth, all the sense on one man." "No." Serana couldn't understand what Cicero meant. "Heh." Cicero laughed shortly before bursting into longer laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha. Don't you smell hee hee hee. Sit his?" As if he found the most interesting thing ever, Cicero spoke cryptically. "You've gotta talk less crazy and more sense before I knock some into you," Serana threatened. "Sense? Ha 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 ha, but that's madness. Hee 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 hee." As Cicero wasn't able to contain his laughter anymore, Serana ignored him and walked towards the sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood. The two of them just took an order from John. Serana was to get ready for the Emperor's assassination plan, while Cicero would ready the Night Mother to be moved. As for him, he had personal things to get done first. Lucien Lachance, for those who don't know, and no one really knew who he was, Lucien was a man who lived 200 years ago in the time of the Oblivion Crisis, and he held the position of one of the Brotherhood speakers at that time. Lucien Lachance was said to be very devout to the cause to the point where his death was legendary among the assassins. But before that, Lucien was the one who recruited the champion of Cyrodiil into the Dark Brotherhood back in the game previous to TSV, Skyrim, Tessive, Oblivion. During his time, Lucien Lachance led the sanctuary of Cheydinhul and discovered a traitor lurking within the ranks of the Brotherhood. While that traitor was unknown, Lucien ordered the entire sanctuary to be purified of all assassins, not even in a heartbeat, to ensure no loose ends would survive. Unfortunately for him, the traitor wasn't a member of the sanctuary, and his silencer, the champion of Cyrodiil, was manipulated by the original traitor to kill most members of the Black Hand, including the listener of the Brotherhood. This scheme led the remaining members of the Black Hand to suspect Lucien Lachance to be the traitor, since his silencer was the one doing the killing. Lucien was captured, hung up, tortured, castrated, and disfigured, all before slowly dying to the surviving members of the Black Hand. His silencer was spared and brought to the Night Mother with the rest of the Black Hand members. There, the Night Mother revealed herself and declared the innocence of Lucien Lachance, as the real traitor was none other than one of the Brotherhood's past victims that infiltrated its ranks, the Black Hand member, Matthew Bellamont. John recalled the information about those events and looked coldly at the ghost of Lucien Lachance. "So, you have heard the tale of Matthew Bellamont and the great treachery of Cheydinhul. Kill a boy's mother, and vengeance festers in the sun," Lachance said. "Heh." John looked up and down at Lucian. That's true. It is always better to not leave any loose ends. Thinking of how many loose ends John himself left, it was ironic of him to say it that way. Of course, it would be a shame letting loose ends bring harm to the innocent, Lucian said. If there was a face to a lawful evil, the Dark Brotherhood's assassins will always be one of those faces. Sadly, today's Brotherhood is more on the neutral side of things. Walk with me, Lachance, John said. Oh, you have something in mind? The Spectre asked. Aside from death and carnage, no, John replied. Good listener. A few minutes later, John and the spectral assassin headed towards the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in Falkreath, and as they reached there, they stopped for a few minutes to observe the situation. So that's what the Brotherhood has been reduced to, the Spectre said. Thinking of some good old purification? John asked. The Brotherhood always needs this kind of maintenance. Do you understand the risks of running a band of killers? Lucian asked. Enlighten me. John asked the Spectre to humor him. Same as all groups, the Brotherhood seeks to drive those who kill towards a certain goal with a certain power behind them. 200 years ago, the Night Mother knew the identity of the traitor among us all along, but she wanted us to be purified, to lose power, and to work again to regain it. So you do not become too powerful and start being ambitious. Spot on, listener. Spot on. Lucian said, the Brotherhood is considered a band of those who embrace chaos but decide to harness it, same as all things that are cities. When these kinds of people fatten up, they lose their purpose too quickly. For that, they all have to be kept on the balance between struggling to survive and working to flourish. I don't mind the principle, John said. Then the Brotherhood has gained an excellent listener. The spectral assassin seemed delighted with the listener's answer, but he started to notice something. John was impossible to see through even for a dweller of cities like him. The thing that John was wearing, greed, was nigh impossible to see through. However, the thing started to feel agitated. Is this natural? As the spectral assassin asked, John looked at greed, which he was wearing like a cloak, and noticed that greed was acting up as if it was boiling. Come on. Not again. At least not now. John became irritated as well. Lust replaced greed. The moonlight crystal anomaly, also known as lust, jumped off the storage cube and attacked the shadow anomaly, also known as greed. The two of them looked like liquids, solids, and gases all at the same time as they fought. Lust immediately took over greed and shed it off John. Lust changed John's appearance to that of the blankiest possible. As greed was tossed on the ground, it started to act up all over the place. John frowned with no features on his face, and wanted to approach it, but greed suddenly stopped and took the shape of a sphere that floated in the air. Interesting thing. Aggressive though. The spectral assassin commented. Talk to me, buddy. What do you see? John asked greed, that was unresponsive, as if not paying any attention to his owner. As its name suggests, greed is very possessive and cherishes materials, but it only devours shadows, unlike gluttony, which is a free-for-all devouring asshole. Lately, John had greed absorb a large quantity of shadow energy in the Temple of Meridia, which may have caused it to be energized and be ready for evolution. Now, it seems that greed has detected something that it seeks to devour. This is greed's third evolution. At this time, it is also supposed to manifest an ego and take a form. As the first sin created by John, it was the weakest for a long time since John created it when he wasn't that strong, unlike envy, for example, who manifested all her three powers from the get-go. Greed, shadow-devouring ether, reform weapons, perfect stealth. Greed started moving by itself in a buzzing, even few seconds, as if to find some resonance. The direction it was heading was the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. This will turn into an absolute headache, John said. Chaos knows no bounds. the spectral assassin said in delight as it watched Greed like watching something so Sithis-like. Eventually, Greed approached the sanctuary's black door, but instead of going towards it, it took a turn to the right and continued forward for 30 feet. I see. John and the spectral assassin both arrived at the same conclusion after witnessing the target Greed was after. Beside the sanctuary's entrance, there was a small puddle of murky dark water that no living thing gathered around. While it felt like water at first glance, staring into it is like staring into the abyss. Stare into Sithis, brother, so that Sithis stares back into you. The spectral assassin came behind John and tempted him to look deeper. John's eyes remained focused on the dark puddle, and in his eyes, darkness spread and widened. A sneer appeared on his face as the puddle started to feel agitated because of his stare. Heh! John's smile widened and the chaos infection within spread through his tattoos, which seemed as if his entire body was covered by them. I've already been to the heart of chaos, John replied and completely overcame the puny chaos gate in front of him. Interesting. The spectral assassin was delighted by John's aptitude for chaos, which in his eyes was unparalleled. Quit playing tricks with me, Lachance. John spoke. I see what Greed wants. Call it. I see. Lucien Lachance nodded and walked ahead to the dark puddle before calling, My old and dear friend, come to me. And just as he called, the response came with vigorous hoarse neigh. The sound of galloping was heard as from the small dark puddle, the void stretched to let out a harbinger of doom in the shape of a powerful steed, black as night with glowing red eyes as a vampire, Shadowmere. This horse is an icon for the Brotherhood, and one of the mysterious creatures known as Doom Beasts that were gifted upon the Brotherhood by Sithis. But today, this horse loved by most of the game players will have another name, Greed's Meal. The sphere-shaped Greed turned into something with many arms and latched on Shadowmere from its body, legs, and head. Shadowmere was one aggressive horse by nature and fought back fiercely, but when you are targeted by Greed's appetite, things don't tend to go well for you. Before it could even free a single limb, Shadowmere was down on the ground, completely immobilized, and being dragged back by Greed to the dark puddle where it came from. John and the spectral assassin watched as the two monstrosities returned to the void and the dark puddle started boiling. John didn't make any sound and remained hidden until the situation calmed down. Something is coming, the spectral assassin said. I know. It is Greed. John replied. It has grown and reached its potential. Just like when Shadowmere came out galloping with vigor, a different horse came the same way, but its appearance was much more menacing. Unlike the black red-eyed Shadowmere, this one was dark with black eyes, almost as if it doesn't have any and just a being that imitates a horse. But as its body fully emerged, it was clear that compared to the monstrous Shadowmere, this is an abomination on a new different scale. An 8-legged horse with two coming out where only one wound came, and its body was longer and much stronger. Greed, shadow-devouring ether, reform weapons, perfect stealth, Sleipnir, Greed ego. Sleipnir? John exclaimed. An 8-legged horse from the Norse mythology. It is the son of Loki and the steed used by Odin. Loki was the mother in that situation. That's so ugly. Even the spectral assassin had a thing or two to say about this product of Greed and Shadowmere. John approached the Greed's embodiment, Sleipnir, and put his hand on his neck, but the horse acted violently and bit John's arm. Seeing how it acted, John had an unamused look on his face. I haven't tamed a horse in a very long while, and I happen to have some time on my hand. John held the horse's head, dragged it violently, opened a portal to the inside of the storage cube, and tossed Greed in. Lachance, follow among. John invited the spectral assassin in and walked after him to spend some time catching up with the talkative ghost and tame a horse along the way. Chapter 651 To Kill an Empire. So for those of you who want to see real life again, I've started reading it from the beginning to get my memory up to speed. I am thinking of continuing and contacting the story if still possible. Serana dear, you killed the gourmet and made the people less merry, but the happiness you are bringing to the Brotherhood is worthy of a grand celebration. Astrid joined Serana's side and offered her wine as a toast, blood wine, Argonian. Thank you, Astrid. Serana received the cup and raised it up, to sit his. Eagerly shouting the name of the Dread Father amidst the assassins like this is supposedly very normal, especially to a newcomer like Serana, but for the veterans, all of them had to make eye contact with Astrid first. Sure. Astrid raised her cup arbitrarily, to sit his, the Night Mother, and for our luckiest charm, the listener. Astrid seemed more than just okay, and so the rest raised their cups, some more enthusiastic than others, of course, but all very focusing on Astrid. Family, Astrid called and moved from Serana's side to the head of the table. I know most of you here were waiting for this for a long time. Which one of you mean and vicious killers is the one to off the Emperor's life should be the greatest assassin alive? I mean no disrespect, but most of you have been working on this mostly with reconnaissance, intel gathering, and planting dead drops. However, Serana here has made 3 major hits and skillfully delivered. Good girl. Astrid seemed satisfied with Serana and showed her favor. Careful there. The rest of the kids will be jealous. Babette, the 9-year-old girl who was 9 for the last 300 years, spoke. Oh, don't worry about that, Grandma. Festus Crex, who looks the oldest elder among the assassins, replied to Babette. Quit it, you 2 old things. Astrid brushed their petty squabble off and continued, most of you have come for me to allow them the chance to take on the Emperor. It is a dangerous job, so you have to be extra careful. The plan is to infiltrate Castle Dour posing as the gourmet with his pass writ and poison the Emperor's food. The one we need is someone who can infiltrate and fit the appearance of the logical age. Astrid continued and eyed Babette. Yes, just bully me because I am 9. Babette acted all upset. Well, this also excludes you, Festus, because your old ass is a bit of a problem, Astrid said. Fine by me. I wouldn't poison the Emperor anyway, Festus said. Who wants to take the honors? Astrid asked the remaining members. Viezra the Argonian raised his hand. Nope. You truly think the Legion will believe that an Argonian is capable of decent cooking? Astrid outright refused him. What about me? Nazir the Redguard asked. I have my utmost faith in you, Nazir, but I prefer that you run the show rather than play in it. Your counsel is invaluable to me to send you on such a risky mission. Astrid refused him. Wife, I can do it. Arnbjorn, Astrid's husband, said. No, you can't. Astrid refused him too in less than a heartbeat. I am an alchemist. Cooking isn't that hard for someone with my talents, said Gabriella the Dunmare. Really? Astrid spoke with an obvious mockery. Food from Morrowind either smells like feet, tastes like feet, looks like feet, or actually just feet. So far, the process of elimination eliminated everyone except for 2, Serana and Cicero. Of course it is impossible for Cicero since he tends to the Night Mother and his overall personality wouldn't cut it for the job, which leaves Serana. She's obviously a vampire. Can she even cook? Well, she did most of the legwork on this. I know, but... Astrid, what do you say? The members argued a little and then left it for Astrid. I want Serana on this one, Astrid said. The honor will be hers. Serana put on a smile and remained silent. Heh. Astrid also smiled. Look at you all calm and confident. I do believe you were born for this task, dear. So, let us begin. The final test of the final plan started and all the assassins were working together on this one even though it was a one-man job. The city has many access points, but we could only prepare one magical method to teleport in and out. If used once either for going in or out, It won't work again and will remove all traces. The location is here. Festus advised. After the siege of the dragon cult, the Legion is very serious about who walks in and out. The new Jarl is also cracking down on our friends from the Thieves Guild, so we couldn't fake any identifications. You will have to pose as the gourmet from the city gate all the way to the castle. Nazir advised. Since we're both vampires, I know how it feels on sunny days, especially when we don't walk in the shadows. Gabriella and I prepared a few lotions that can act as cosmetics and hide that you are a vampire. Also, this ring will change your eye colors and give it a natural color. Remember, don't use spells to hide your identity since there will be a ton of Imperial wizards. Babette advised. Entering the castle is one problem. Reaching the Emperor is another. Make sure to act as natural, innocent, and clueless. Some nervousness and goofiness will cut it just fine. You're meeting His Majesty the Emperor after all. Focus on your attitude, etiquette, and language. In my opinion, try using the Bretonic dialect to give an extra sense of mystery. Gabriella advised. You can practice cooking from the gourmet's books or use your charisma to boss around the kitchen. The problem here will be adding the poison. Since the Emperor's security is the tightest on Nirn and there will be someone to try the food before presenting it to him, you will have to drop it in that instance. It has to be precise and lethal. Many eyes will be watching at that time. Viezra advised. I've stashed some weapons within the construction site outside the collapsed part of the castle at this location. Get to them if you need them. Armbjorn advised. Here, take this, it's called Jaren root. It's a rare plant, found only on the island of Strozmkai. It can be served like any vegetable. All it takes is one taste, and the effects are quite immediate. The Emperor will be serving sitahs before he even knows he's dead. Once he has been killed, escape through the upper door. It leads to the collapsed bridge which is unguarded. There, you will find a ton of ropes and scaffoldings. Don't hesitate when you get there and arrive at the evacuation point. Astrid advised. The plan was tight, risky, and daring. It depended on many variables, especially in the bit where Serana will be inside the castle, but she was capable enough to deal with that. So, let's go for one final run? Nazir asked. Let's do it. Serana nodded and stood facing him. Halt. The city is closed by the Emperor's orders. State your business immediately. I have been summoned. Serana handed the writ of passage to the legionary on the gate, whose eyes widened upon the sight of the Imperial Legion's seal. Hold on for a moment. An officer will guide you in. As the guard said, an officer hurried to the front gate and welcomed Serana with a group of 4 elite legionaries and 2 Imperial knights. Serana descended from her horse and carried her bag, which the officer insisted to carry for her as she was guided in. Seeing the mysterious gourmet, many were taken as she was a small young woman with rosy cheeks and firm eyes. Her smile was only on her lips and her confidence was towering to the sky. Serana had her fair share of formalities a lifetime ago, so she had to play the role by her standards as a world-class mysterious chef, which is different from what Astrid wanted her to do. Confidence is the key, that's how everyone can waltz their way anywhere. Act like you belong and you will belong. Serana was led through the city up the castle, and was met with Commander Morrow. So the gourmet, I will receive your writ of passage, Commander Morrow said and escorted Serana on the way in. I take it that the kitchen has been prepared? Serana asked. Yes. Chef Gianna has been preparing since the morning for your. Let's not waste time. You soldier types wasted enough of my time with your useless formalities already. Huh. Commander Morrow was taken by the attitude. I apologize, but what? Serana became more imposing. Why are you wasting time? The Emperor's not going to feed himself. The kitchen, Commander. Yes? The Commander's face went dark, but he still complied. This way. Serana followed Commander Morrow, and arrived at the door of the castle's main tower. There, the commander opened the door for her and she stormed in. Following the scent of cooking, Serana found her way to the kitchen, walking ahead of the commander, and walked in. As she ran into the first chef-like individual changing room, she demanded, "Eh wa?" The man profoundly became confused from the imposing young woman walking in front of Commander Morrow, and paused for a second. "You deaf?" "Changing room," Serana demanded once again with a stronger character. "Right this way, ma'am." The young chef led the way. The man walked ahead as fast as his leg could serve him, and as he looked back, he saw the serious face of the young woman urging him forward, which made him almost lose his footing at the doorstep of the changing room. "Move aside." Serana walked in with her bag. Less than a minute passed, and walked out dressed completely like a chef. Once she did, she could see the commander speaking with an imperial woman who was questioning about the young lady barging into her kitchen, like that for the commander to utter, "the gourmet," right before they saw Serana. "The gourmet?" Finally, when I heard the gourmet was being brought in to cook for the emperor, I could hardly believe it. "It's just," the head chef Gianna walked to Serana with smiles and checked her out. "Just what?" Serana asked. "A Breton?" Gonna notice Serana's accent. "Well, I just never expected the gourmet to be a Breton. It almost seems too obvious. Some of the greatest cooks have been Bretons, and—" "Alright, once you're done, tell me what in oblivion is this mess?" Serana pointed at the changing room. There were many lockers where the chefs changed their clothes for the kitchenware. However, the situation was messy and the room was unclean. "Oh!" Gianna's face turned pale and yellow. Most of the assistants here are active Legion service staff. It is difficult to, but we keep them in line. Everything is very spotless. I can assure you that." "Assure me?" Serana frowned. "Assure me by lining up your staff." Gianna lowered her head and stared with anger at the 7 assistants she had in the kitchen before telling them to stand in line. Serana walked ahead and looked at them one by one, causing a nervous situation, but then looked away and stood beside Gianna. This one, him, and that short guy," Serana said. "Yes?" Gianna asked in a very nervous voice. "Send them to bathe," Serana stated. Commander Morrow was still present in the kitchen, and was absent-mindedly watching how things unfold before telling the 5 men to walk out of the kitchen. Who remained were only Gianna and 2 assistants. "Let's get to work," Serana said. "We are pretty understaffed like this," Gianna nervously complained, but she found no remorse in the gourmet's gaze. "What are the orders?" Serana asked. "Oh, yes, but of course. Ahem. The Emperor has requested your signature dish, the potage le magnifique. I've taken the liberty of getting it started. But the cookbook only says so much, and everyone makes the potage differently. I would be honored if we could make it the gourmet's special way. The base broth is already boiled. We can get started right now. So, which ingredient should I add next?" Gianna asked. Historians recorded various conflicting accounts about this moment. Player choices. One historical account, Good Choices, tells that the content was a carrot, a splash of mead, 1 nernroot, which is wonderful for the seasoning, and 1 cup of diced horker meat. Another historical account, Gianna's Choices, tell that the content was a pinch of frost salts, some chorus eggs for additional flavor, a sprig or 2 of thistle, and some good tomato paste. Lastly, there was a historical account, Fucked Up Choices, that claimed that the content was a sweet roll, vampire dust for an earthly texture, a giant's toe for some reason, and a gold septim coin which slightly metallic but delicious aftertaste. The historical accounts may differ, but the lethal ingredient in the potage le magnifique was definitely the geron root oil, which was slipped in by Serana right after the Emperor's food taster tried the potage. The end result was, as any would expect, the Emperor's death. Not the real Emperor though, a body double as it was revealed later once he cornered Serana at the tip of his blade. All along, this was a trap made by Commander Morrow to lure out the Dark Brotherhood that was targeting the Emperor and avenge his son, who was framed for a conspiracy to assassinate the Emperor and got killed by Serana. To add more to the drama, this was also a trap laid by Astrid. She never had any plans to save Serana after assassinating the Emperor, and all the escape routes were already busted. Astrid wanted no listener in her sanctuary, but she wouldn't have thought that Serana would survive the ambush in Castle Dour by the preparations the real listener made for her. Also, by the time Serana left the sanctuary, Astrid went ahead to find trouble with Cicero and get rid of him, but things didn't go as planned. Cicero seemed to have gone missing even though the coffin of the Night Mother was still there. Cicero would never leave the coffin unattended, and no one had a clue where he went. That night, the Falkreath sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood was supposed to be attacked by the Imperial Legion. However, long before that attack would come, strange things started to happen in the sanctuary. Armbjorn's forge would heat up on its own, Babette's pet spider would start getting agitated and spit venom if left unattended, Gabriella's alchemy station would start producing smokes and flames as if possessed by something, the spectral assassin would reveal himself and make some evil laughter that would echo wherever he goes, and the doors around the sanctuary would shut and open themselves magically, which made Festus Crex keep casting spells on them to keep them from trapping the assassins. And all of that and much more. Something was very wrong in the sanctuary, but the cold-blooded assassins didn't really panic until they realized that the black door, the one that leads in and out of the sanctuary, was not opening at all. A curse? A punishment? A retribution? All eyes landed on Astrid, questioning her about what she has done to the listener and the Night Mother's keeper. They all knew it, but no one uttered them. Yet that wasn't the end. The black door of the sanctuary opened once and someone walked in. As the assassins rushed out to see what was going on and held the door, they were stunned to see that it was Cicero who returned carrying the unconscious Serana. And the door was shut once again, trapping the assassins in again. At this moment the assassins realized that the enemy was here, and as Cicero told them, "He walks among us." Chapter 652, Among Us, 1. He walks among us. The fuck you mean with that? Who walks among us? He whispers. He speaks to whom he chooses, and his choice is absolute, and his will is that of the Dread Father. The will of Sithis. I'll kill this fucking clown. Stop it, Armbjorn. Festus Crex spoke as he tried to hold Armbjorn's arm as the sight of Cicero dragging Serana into the sanctuary brought disorder among the assassins who failed to open the door after it was closed again. Fuck. It's not budging. Viezra punched the black door with frustration. Everyone was falling apart one way or another, and Astrid was watching all of this from behind them all. She saw the spreading madness and couldn't endure it anymore. Silence. Her voice was strong enough to make all the assassins fall in line. They all looked at her and remembered who is the real authority around here. Carry the listener inside. She spoke to Armbjorn, then turned to Viezra. Apprehend Cicero. No. What are you doing? Mad woman. Mad and bad. You know who I am, what I am. I am the keeper of the Night Mother. Cicero squirmed, but Viezra pressed him against the wall with a knife to his throat. Astrid, please act carefully. Festus Crex spoke to Astrid with a worried face. Take Cicero inside. I'll question him. Astrid said, and the entire group moved to the sanctuary's hall in the center of the sanctuary. Serana was laid on a table and Cicero was brought in while held by Viezra and Nazir. Speak, clown. Where were you? Astrid asked calmly. Me? Cicero went out to follow the listener. Cicero was worried and had a feeling she would. Slap. Keep speaking like that and you will regret it. Astrid slapped Cicero hard and continued, Where were you? Cicero had an unpleasant look in his eyes after having his face struck like that, but under the grasps of Viezra and Nazir, he was helpless for now. Cicero went to solitude? Cicero replied. Insubordination. You acted against my commands, Astrid said. Cicero acted to be good for the listener. Good for the Brotherhood. That's what we should do, follow the listener, not send them out to die. It's the listener, the listener. Slap. Enough with your lies. Astrid didn't accept to even hear him out. You, vile bastard, have done something to our sanctuary. Fix it now or else. What? Done something? Cicero has done nothing. Cicero is innocent. Cicero pleaded innocence, but many judging looks were in the eyes of those around him. Astrid didn't seem to be taking Cicero's answers even into consideration and had no intentions of believing him as she raised her hand to strike him once again. Astrid, enough? Babette stood in front of Astrid, urging her to stop. You're taking it too far. Even Nazir, who was holding Cicero, had to intervene. What are you two doing? Viezra looked at the two with anger. This clown is up to something and you're standing up for him against our mistress? Cicero was out there to retrieve the listener, lizard. Festus argued with Viezra. She is the listener and he is the keeper. Please, don't you see you are making our problems worse? Even Gabriella stepped in. Astrid, listen please. Nazir spoke. Don't antagonize him before we hear him out. You all have gone mad. Arnbjorn, on the other hand, seemed to be going to get aggressive now that the house is divided against his wife. Seeing everything simply going to madness and all the assassins reaching out for their blades, Astrid felt that everything would go south if she can't control the circus at such a moment. Fuck it. All of you, stand down. She shouted and walked between them all. Gabriella, go deal with that alchemy lab of yours. Babette, your spider is going crazy. Kill it or calm it down. Husband, control that heat coming out of the forge. Viezra, do something about the black door. And Festus, just go fix the doors or something. Astrid shouted at all of them and pushed them away. She then looked at Nazir, who kept his hand on Cicero's shoulder, and Serana, who was lying motionless. I am not sure what is going on here, but you, don't speak to me like that ever again. Astrid warned Nazir. Yes, mistress, Nazir said with a dejected look on his face. And you? She then looked at Cicero. You will explain yourself from the beginning. Astrid always suspected Cicero to be plotting against her, and seeing how the others acted, her suspicions turned out to be true in her eyes. She really wanted to incriminate Cicero somehow, but the situation was against her since the sanctuary was not functioning well. As for Cicero's answers, they were indeed mad, but they would make sense eventually. Cicero made it clear that he doesn't trust Astrid either, since she is hijacking the position of the leader from the listener, especially after sending listener Serana to her death. Cicero claimed that he went to Solitude and saved Serana before escaping together and heading back to the sanctuary. As for everything else that is happening, Cicero said that he has no idea what is what, but what he is sure of is that they are not alone and the whispers of Sithiz are echoing in the sanctuary. It is as if the sanctuary became haunted with the anger of Sithiz, and who is to blame other than the one who drove the listener to a corner? But how can he hear those supposed whispers of Sithiz when we can't? Nazir asked. The question is, my dear manly Redguard friend, how can you not? Cicero answered. Don't speak in circles, clown. Nazir said while aiming his blade at Cicero's nose. I am warning you. What do you want me to say? Said Cicero, looking at Nazir's blade without being really threatened. As I said, once the whispers of Sithiz are heard, and Cicero has always been hearing them, brother, always, those whispers will never stop. He's a nutjob, Astrid. Nazir turned to Astrid and withdrew his blade from Cicero's face. A nutjob that is the keeper of the Night Mother. I advise you to be cautious, but he wasn't here when it all happened. I don't want to deal with more nut jobs than what we already have. Astrid looked at Cicero fiercely. Speak, clown, how did you open the black door from the outside when no one can open it from the inside? I don't really know. Cicero spoke the words and that's it. Opened. The door, oh the door. I am telling you, Astrid, it is not the problem here. Citis walks and he is angry. Cicero said. I am done with him. Astrid turned away and left Cicero with Nazir. You believe Cicero, don't you, brother? Cicero asked Nazir with broken expressions. Nazir didn't reply until Astrid left off and looked around to make sure that nobody was hearing. I know there is something wrong, Nazir said. I knew it was wrong long before either you or even the listener would show up in here. Oh, the Redguard knows. The wise man of the desert. Cicero clapped. Cicero is pleased. The listener will be pleased too, and our sweet, sweet mother is surely pleased. Yeah? I argue otherwise. Nazir said and moved away. Of course he was talking about the way Astrid managed the Brotherhood. She wanted to be the leader of this sanctuary and not answer to anyone, be it a listener or the Night Mother or even Citis himself. This was clear especially when the 5 tenets of the Brotherhood were abolished by her not long after the fall of the last listener, Alazan Dupré. But to Cicero, this situation was perfect and the plan laid down was in motion smoother than ever. He turned to the collapsed Sarana and smiled. Rest well. Cicero then left her unattended and hurried to the chamber where the Night Mother and her coffin are. No one really noticed so far, but the coffin of the Night Mother was closed and sealed by powerful magic. No one would suspect this since Cicero would attend to the coffin very zealously and go completely nuts if one was to approach the Night Mother when the coffin is open. As Cicero walked into the coffin's room, he smiled. His smile was just thin, curving, and wide that his ecstasy was overflowing all over. Every fiber of his being was so joyous to the point where he couldn't help but sing as he took off his jester hat. Sneaky, sneaky, stabby, stabby, the cat creeps through the abbey. Cicero carries the sneaky cat, she tells him to raise his hat. The cat walks out to start a slaughter, for she is the listener's daughter. Yes, how wonderful! Cicero is pleased. He. Nefertiti manifested through Cicero's hat and landed on the floor. She started licking her hand and cleaning her face before making sure everything was in order and moving out to do her task. Cicero watched Nefertiti with absolute fascination and wonder before taking his notebook and scratching a few notes about her elegance and grace. He even tried to pat her head, but she reacted badly. Hiss! Hands off, mortal! The cat spoke and the mortal jester was stunned. Homan said not to kill you, but don't tempt me, ow. Yes, Cicero understands. Cicero replied and watched her set off. In all his days, never was Cicero spoken to by a cat that is not a caseate. But that was just a mere distraction from the original goal. Cicero remembered what he had to do and his thin, wide, and menacing smile curved his lips up again. Mother, mother in the coffin, speak to the listener some more often. Make your whispers heard by all, and your children will heed your call. Ha-ha, 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 ha-ha. Cicero was finding it hard to contain his feelings as he slowly calmed down and dusted off his hat before putting it back. He then swiped his hands over his face, and all his expressions turned to the utter sadness of the clown. While he was busy fantasizing, the sanctuary was going through one uproar after the other. The heat of the forge that Armbjorn works was rising gradually, and he had to maintain it every few minutes so it wouldn't cause a big fire. The alchemy lab was having a similar problem as residues of the poisons brewed by the assassins were evaporating and causing the pet frostbite spider of Babette to act aggressively. The doors of the sanctuary would open and close themselves from time to time randomly, and sometimes would lock people in if left unwatched. But most importantly was the black door that Viezra tried everything with, and the spectral assassin who would show up and go away every once in a while with creepy laughter. For the assassins could think of, the sanctuary was going through some setbacks that even their magician Festus Crex was unable to fix. "The door is not budging," Nazir said as he and Viezra tried all sorts of door-busting techniques with the black door. "It won't work." Astrid joined them and commented on their pointless actions. "The black doors have powerful seals which only open when you answer their questions accordingly. There got to be something," Viezra said. "Could it be that someone has changed the word?" "But Cicero said that he came in after saying the same words we say," Nazir argued. "It is something else, Astrid. Something far beyond us." Astrid became burdened with more thoughts and seemed like waiting to retreat away from this disturbing reality. "Tell Armbjorn to try and deal with the door, Nazir. As for you, Viezra, go see if Cicero— no, never mind. Go see if Gabriella or Festus need help," Astrid said and walked back to her chambers. Stunned as all the other assassins are, the matron of the Falkreath sanctuary barely could put on a composed facade that crumbled right away as she closed the door behind her. She couldn't help but feel burdened by something nobody else knows. She had indeed sent Serana to an escapable situation up north in solitude. She didn't just plan for Serana's demise, but she reported the assassination attempt carried away by Serana to Commander Morrow, meaning that the man was waiting for Serana from the start. Yet seeing how she survived sent shivers down in Astrid's bones and caused her to feel like she was double-crossed by the commander who didn't seem to have killed Serana. In her mind, Astrid understood the situation as follows. Serana went to assassinate the Emperor and Commander Morrow was expecting her. Fueled by his desire to protect the Emperor and avenge his son, the commander should have obliterated Serana the moment she walks into the city, but somehow, Serana survived and returned back with Cicero, who secretly followed her as backup on his own initiative. Things are fucked up in ways even Astrid can't dare to imagine. If Cicero wasn't careful, and that's a big if, he would have been followed by the Penitus Oculatus. Now the listener is lying down unconscious, the sanctuary is going crazy, and the assassins are split into three sides. Astrud, Viezra, and Armbjorn on one side, Babette, Festus, and Gabriella on a neutral side, and now Cicero, Serana, and probably Nazir on the side that is questioning Astrid's actions. "We need to evacuate the sanctuary," Astrid spoke to herself. "There are many hideouts where the low-ranking recruits use." That would be her plan until the situation is over, at least. Still, it would have been a good plan if the following didn't happen. It all began when Astrid heard a high-pitched scream. She took her blade and rushed out as well as all the assassins in the sanctuary. Astrid was the last to arrive as she had to go across the main hall where Serana was resting and arrived at the hallway between the main chambers and the Night Mother's chamber. There, all the assassins were gathered around something, or someone. That someone was lying down on their back in a puddle of their blood, and a deep wound across their chest. Viezra, the Argonian assassin, was dead. One dead assassin between 7 suspects in the inner sanctum of the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. Chapter 653, Among Us, 2. Chapter 653, Among Us, 2. Ramadan Kareem, everybody. Happy holy month to y'all out there, Muslims and non-Muslims. Redheart, 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 fasting is gonna be tough this year since the heat will come back at some time mid-April for the Mediterranean basin. Raise fist, raise fist, raise fist, stay hydrated. Either way, I'll keep the work rolling and I may continue RSTUM soon. May God bless us with success and fortune and send down upon us the capacity of peace and love within our hearts. Amen. Palms up together. Viezra the Argonian was killed, and lying in a puddle of his own blood. 7 killers stood around him, but none seemed like the one that killed him, for they all showed absolute innocence. Astrid stood one between the seven and watched every action and reaction the others did in silence. Gabriella, Festus, Babette, Armbjorn, Nazir, and Cicero. Due to personal bias, Astrid checked Cicero thoroughly, but there was not even a single hint of blood on him. The others were also innocent and had no reason to kill Viezra. "This is getting to utter madness," said Festus the mage. "The sanctuary is turning mad and now we have a killer in our midst." "You can't say that." Babette found his words dangerous and wanted to shut him up. "Think about it. The sanctuary is acting like this must be due to a vengeful intent of a powerful being. Such beings can mislead and possess lesser beings like us. The killer may be among us, but they are not one of us currently." Festus insisted. "Shut up, you old fool." Nazir didn't like the words Festus spoke either. "Everyone, shut up." Astrid shouted at them and sat down on one knee in front of Viezra, who was a dear friend to her. "Who found him first?" Astrid asked. "Me. I did." Gabriella replied as she seemed disturbed by the death of Viezra. "She could be the one who has killed him and screamed," Festus said. "How can you say such a thing?" Nazir shouted at Festus. "Cicero thinks you all should calm down and look for clues." Cicero meekly started talking. "It could have been that clown." Armbjorn pointed fingers towards Cicero. "What? Cicero didn't do anything. Cicero was just tending to the Night Mother," Cicero said. "Astrid, you believe this madman?" Armbjorn asked as if eager to get rid of Cicero. "Hey!" Babette called. "Or maybe you could have done it and came to blame poor Cicero. Tell me, Wolfman, you were supposed to be at the sanctuary's door, how come you are here even before Astrid?" Cicero flipped the accusation towards Armbjorn. "Hey!" Babette called again. "I was back for some tools when I heard the scream," Armbjorn defended, "and you're the one being suspicious. Isn't this at the doorstep?" "Hey, asshats!" Babette shouted this last time, taking everyone's attention towards her. Looking at the 300-years-old child, some felt the urge to entertain the possibility that she is the killer and others begged for her to say something less sinister. But Babette pointed towards the main hall of the sanctuary and spoke the words that let them lose it from fear. "The listener is missing." As an immediate action, the group of 7 all turned towards the place where listener Serana was supposed to be lying and couldn't recover from the shock until Astrid herself spoke. "She was there just now." With this remark, the situation and the suspicion started to shift in directions no one here was able to predict. "Listener, dear listener, where are you?" In a burst of panic, Cicero ran towards where Serana was last seen and looked around for her like a madman. "The vampire girl. Can it be her?" Armbjorn spoke, but Astrid turned to him with a death glare telling him to shut up. "Not the vampire girl, the listener. Show some goddamn respect, you mutt." Festus Krex shouted at Armbjorn to keep him in check. "Why you?" Armbjorn wasn't really in the mood to be lectured, so he faced Festus head-on, but this confrontation was cut short as Astrid walked past through the two with her focus directed on the listener's whereabouts. "Move Viezra out of here," Astrid said. "Band together and look for the listener. I want all of you to be within sight of each other." None of this made any sense. Astrid started to think that this scheme was played by Serana and Cicero. If they survived Commander Morrow at Solitude and planned this together, this would be the only thing that makes sense. But Astrid can no longer point fingers freely since she has lost the support of many members already with the existence of the listener, the supposed leader of the Dark Brotherhood. Long ago, Astrid managed to convince her sanctuary members that there was no need for the Night Mother orders or the 5 tenets if there is no listener to lead them, and thus, she appointed herself a leader of an independent sanctuary, which happened to be the last remaining standing Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. It meant that she is the leader of everything Dark Brotherhood related. But this changed with Cicero's arrival, who kept the Night Mother all of these years. Then the listener was chosen and this whole mess started, thanks to who? Cicero and Serana? Or Astrid? Those who are at fault easily realize the fault they are in, but something makes them defy admitting their mistake. Pride. Astrid didn't want to be seen as a small and insignificant assassin who backs off when shit goes down. This kind of life isn't kind to those who step back. Even against the Dread Father and the Night Mother, shit has to be taken all the way through. She had to kill them, Serana and Cicero, while they were busy aiming for her life. Hunting the hunter is a thrilling concept to say the least. Let's get going. For the coming hour or so, Astrid tried to move together as a group. Serana was still missing and Cicero was weeping to the point where she wanted to just get rid of him immediately. They looked everywhere from the laboratory to the living quarters, to the main hall to the Night Mother chamber to the Astrid's quarters. They didn't leave a spot unchecked, but they found no clue on the whereabouts of Serana or the killer of Viezra. "We can't keep going like this," Babette complained. "The forge's fire is burning hot and the alchemy lab is emitting poisonous fumes. Are you going to keep things like this for long? Someone sabotaged our sanctuary on purpose to keep us separated," Astrid said. "I have a plan. I just need time." "We don't have time," Gabriella retorted. "If the poison fumes spread, forget about time. We will be in the grasps of Sithiz." "Ugh, fine." Astrid couldn't handle this more than that and had to cut some slack. "Everyone will be within the line of sight of one another while we deal with this." Astrid then assigned the assassin as follows: Festus to keep an eye on the doors inside the living quarters and prevent them from acting wild with his magic. Gabriella would keep an eye on him from the alchemy lab and deal with the poison fumes, since it is her expertise. Nazir would guarding the hallway between the living quarters and the Night Mother chambers. Babette would hold the passway between the lab and the main hall to keep an eye on Gabriella. Armbjorn will go to the smithy in the main hall and control its intensifying fires, while watching Babette, and the last would be Cicero, who was told to stay put in the main hall despite his protests and demands to prioritize looking for the listener. The whole thing with Cicero's placement was due to Astrid's distrust of him, which will keep him under the sharp senses of her werewolf husband Armbjorn, the vampire Babette, and the Redguard Nazir. As for Astrid, "I will check the Night Mother's chamber myself, then find a way with the black door somehow." Astrid didn't seem confident, but she still had some tricks in her sleeves to try out. Some of the secrets she knows as the matron of Falkreath Sanctuary and all. She went into the Night Mother's chambers and, for some reason, Cicero was oddly quiet. He who would throw a tantrum if a single speck of dust came within close proximity of the Night Mother's coffin. When Astrid walked into that chamber, and scanned it carefully with her dagger in hand, she couldn't find a single trace of suspicion so that she could use it against Cicero. His living quarters were also clean without a trace of any clue as well. The last thing that Astrid needed to look into was the Night Mother's coffin itself. Astrid believed in the Night Mother, who used to control the Brotherhood and all, but beyond that, this woman was just a corpse, a medium for the Dread Father Sithiz. Putting aside the noises of the thoughts she had, Astrid reached out to the Night Mother's coffin and pulled its doors. But the doors didn't open and the coffin remained sealed. There was a secret keyhole in the pattern of the coffin, but Astrid had no time to try and unlock it. Cicero will surely make the situation look bad for Astrid if the seals were undone. Astrid retreated away from the coffin and walked out of the chamber back to the main hall outside. Found nothing in there. She spoke to her husband. "I'll keep an eye on the entrance and try to figure out something about the black door." "All right, be careful," Armbjorn replied. As Astrid headed out to the entrance, Cicero kept watching her closely and then focused on Armbjorn, who was keeping an eye on Cicero as well. Babette watched the two from her spot and felt the situation getting on her nerves before exchanging eye contact with Nazir, who nodded to her, meaning that he will be going back to check on Festus. Just as he turned around, Babette saw Astrid coming back where she came from. She walked past Armbjorn and headed towards Babette. "Where are you going?" Babette asked Astrid. "Worry about the others, dear," Astrid replied, showing dejection towards the fact that she is being questioned. "I'm just looking for a spell that old Festus may or may not know." As Astrid walked by Babette, the latter took a step ahead and asked one more question. "Between you and me, are you really concerned for the listener? We've been together for long years, and you're not having a hold of this. Going against the will of Sithis is foolish," Babette advised. It seemed that Astrid and Babette went way back for Babette to wait for Astrid and tell her such words. Indeed? Surprisingly, Astrid agreed. All right, Babette felt something fishy about the answer. "But the listener isn't my concern as much as you all are at the moment," Astrid continued. "If you all can be saved, I'll first make sure that you do survive. Time will tell." Astrid's words made her seem pessimistic and cold, but somehow still the Astrid who feels for her family, not someone who became cold and drunk on power. "Glad that you're still with us?" Babette said as Astrid walked off the lab where Gabriella is and went down the living quarters where Festus is. It all became quiet for the next couple of minutes before it wasn't anymore. It became noisy, frightening, and chaotic all in a mere second when a scream was heard echoing deep from the sanctuary. The voice felt like Festus and came from the living quarters. "What is that?" Cicero questioned, but Armbjorn glared at him. "You stay put. Move and I'll split your skull." Armbjorn aimed at Cicero with an axe before standing at a distance not too far from him. As for Gabriella, Nazir, and Babette, they headed towards the living quarters and entered from two different entrances to check on what was happening. "Festus, where are you?" shouted Gabriella, who was the closest to Festus. "Old man," shouted Nazir. "Where is Astrid? She was just here," shouted Babette. As the three entered the room first, they could find neither Festus Krex, whose voice was just heard, nor Astrid, who had just walked in. As their voices became louder, a fourth joined them in the room. "What's going on here? Where's Festus?" Gabriella, Nazir, and Babette all turned around towards the voice that came from the lab entrance. "Astrid, you're here," Gabriella reacted. "Festus has disappeared," with a loud scream, Nazir reported right away. "What?" Astrid frowned. "Hold up right there." But Babette seemed to have something to say. "Astrid, how are you coming from here?" "What?" Astrid became confused. "What do you mean? You just walked past me while I was on my post. You said you were coming to see Festus," Babette said. "What are you talking about?" Astrid retorted. "I was trying to figure something out with the black door until I heard a scream." Astrid walked into the room and descended down to the dining place where Babette and Gabriella were. "What are you talking about, Babette?" Gabriella asked. "I didn't see her coming from your direction." "Are you kidding me?" Babette said while displaying anger towards Gabriella. "I am wise enough not to do so." Gabriella raised her hands meekly. "But if she would walk past you to the living quarters, she must have passed behind me. There is no other way unless she came from Nazir's direction. I didn't go past any of you. I just stayed there until I heard screaming." Astrid defended herself. Then, Babette thought, "How just. I heard Festus talking with someone," said Nazir. "I thought it was you, Gabriella." "No," Gabriella denied, "and I had an eye on him. He talked to nobody." "That's impossible." Nazir seemed doubtful. "Are you all kidding me?" Astrid angrily shouted. "You can't even look over your shoulders? You can't discern whether there is an enemy in our midst or not?" Babette watched that and spoke. "But you said that if all of us can be saved, you will make sure that we get to, and you agreed with me when I told you it is foolish to go against the will of Sithis." The three individuals around looked at her. Babette seemed to have had a conversation with that supposed Astrid, and some words were said that do not align with what the usual Astrid would display. Astrid would never openly oppose the Dread Father, but she would never admit that it holds any significance to her. "I didn't say any of that," Astrid said. "Right?" Babette nodded. "You wouldn't. Just when things couldn't get any more dramatic, it simply did with a metallic noise and two strong thuds. Both the doors of the dining hall, from the lab and the hallway between chambers, were forced shut, trapping Astrid, Babette, Gabriella, and Nazir inside. "Fuck!" shouted Nazir. Everyone ran to the doors panicking, but the only way to open them was to force them open with magic. "I know a spell. I am just not good at it," Gabriella said. "Hurry!" shouted Astrid. "Armbjorn is out there with that clown freak." Astrid wanted to hurry up to her husband, who was now stranded alone with Cicero, the one that Astrid suspects, but as Gabriella cast her magic roar, a mighty roar of a werewolf, something happened and Armbjorn seemingly morphed into his beast form. Click. Gabriella's unlocking spell worked in its second attempt, and Astrid rushed out blade in hand, leading the other three. The four immediately paused, however, when they saw Armbjorn as a werewolf looking at them without any ferocious hint in his eyes. They paused in relief. "Husband, where is the cielo?" As Astrid wanted to confirm that everything is still all right and took the first step towards her husband, her surroundings darkened in a blink. It was too sudden. It was too quick. It was too frightening. The alchemy lab exploded from the unlifted pressure in its tubes, rushing out a burst of chemical gases that caused all the lanterns, torches, and blazers to dim in a greenish hue. Astrid was pushed ahead, Babette hid under a table, and Nazir held Gabriella and jumped back into the living quarters. During that burst of darkness, Astrid could see only thanks to the intense flames of the forge that survived the gas's release, and the silhouette of her husband Armbjorn was clear in his werewolf form. But as she saw that, something lifted her husband up in the air and tossed him into the fire of his own forge. Thud, 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 and the sound of heavy thuds vibrated through the sanctuary. Chapter 654. Among Us 3. Chapter 654. Among Us 3. The disappearance of Festus, the timely trap in the living quarters, the eruption of the alchemy lab, and the attack on Armbjorn. Someone timed everything very perfectly for Astrid to witness. Those were her thoughts as she crawled up and ran to the forge where her werewolf husband was struggling inside, before dragging him out of it without minding the burns she suffered. The werewolf was in clear pain and agony, but Astrid couldn't just stand there. She pushed him with all her might across the dark hall to the opposite side, where a water stream made a small pond inside the sanctuary. She immediately ran with him into the water, and put him down to extinguish the flames that were eating him alive. "Bjorn, Bjorn, calm down. Easy, easy, love. Please." Astrid screamed out of her wits as she tried to stop Armbjorn from moving, but he wasn't feeling good and struggled like a wounded beast before finally becoming quiet. The gases from the explosion started to slowly dissipate and light started to brighten through the sanctuary once again. The sight of Armbjorn became visibly clear to Astrid, who sat on her knees in front of him, drenched in water, and bearing many burn marks from entering the forge and moving the burning werewolf. "No!" Astrid's shoulders collapsed and her face turned dumbfounded and pale. Her blonde hair was all wet and her eyes were bloodshot. "No!" She put her hands on the body of the dead werewolf. He, who was charred black from the intense fires and died a painful death, was her husband and only true family in the world. "Enolo!" Screaming from the pain of her loss, the three assassins who were just with her joined her in the hall. Babette walked to her and Nazir supported Gabriella to walk up. By the sands, Nazir saw what had become of Armbjorn and sighed. Thud. A strong sound vibrated through the sanctuary and made the place shake from its power. "It is coming from outside," Babette said as she saw the dust coming from above. "Astrid, get it together. I'll see what that is." Nazir helped Gabriella down and headed towards the entrance of the sanctuary. Astrid, we need you with us? Gabriella spoke to Astrid, but the latter was completely frozen in front of her husband's body. Hurry! No time left to waste. Babette dragged Astrid from her shoulders and got her out of the water, but Astrid only looked around like a lost person. You're all right? Astrid asked. Who? Gabriella asked back. That damnable man. The keeper. Cicero. Where is he? Astrid said with the blade of woe in her hand. Surely she meant no good towards the mad jester. It is the Legion. Nazir came back running. Legion soldiers are trying to break into the sanctuary with a battering ram. The black door won't fall. Babette said, it won't be broken unless they have the words. They said the words, but it seemed the black door wouldn't work from outside either. Nazir said. Then we are safe. Until we flush out the traitor, we are safe. Astrid still insisted on the idea of a traitor, and looked around till she saw a blood trace. It led to the hallway between the living quarters and the Night Mother's chamber up through the stairs, and all she needed was to get there and do the deed. Astrid walked out shaking, limping, and devastated. The remaining three followed her and all entered the hallway. There they saw Cicero at its end. He was lying on the ground with 2 claw marks running deep through his chest. Mother, mother, answer me, was I, fool of hearts, worthy, or it was, all in vain to vain? Cicero hallucinated from his injuries, which seemed to have been caused by Arnbjorn. But Cicero wasn't alone, and he was receiving treatment by someone Astrid wanted to see so badly. Someone whom she wanted to blame as much as Cicero. Her agent turned listener. Serana. I see that it is just the 4 of you. Serana said. Traitor! Astrid called. Me? Serana smiled. Too bad, you've got the wrong person. My husband is dead. Astrid shouted. Viezera is dead. She shouted again. Festus is gone. She shouted last. And that's upsetting you? Serana asked. I should have never accepted the likes of you. Astrid glared with hate, neither the likes of you nor the likes of him. Astrid took one first painful step towards her vengeance. But neither I nor he killed any of your people. Shut up! Neither I nor he betrayed the Brotherhood. I said shut up! Astrid jumped towards Serana, knife in hand, but just as she did so, a shadow struck her and pushed her from the hallway into the Night Mother's chambers. She landed by rolling on the ground, and could hardly stand up afterward. The shadow that struck her disappeared, and the ones who ran for her were her 3 assassin subordinates. Serana, stop this! Gabriella shouted. I didn't do anything. Serana walked into the Night Mother's chamber, while helping the injured Cicero to stand. Then why did you do all this? Nazir asked with a hand on his sword's hilt ready to fight at a moment's notice. There is a traitor in our midst indeed, Serana said, but it is neither me nor Cicero. We only followed the orders of the listener. The listener? Astrid recovered from her daze and heard Serana's words. So, you weren't a listener? No. Serana replied. I am a member of the Black Hand, all right, and I always answer to the one true listener of the Dark Brotherhood. Cicero as well, he answers to the listener too. It is by his orders that this sanctuary was to be purified. Purified! The word ran through the tongues of every assassin in the sanctuary as they shuddered from its true meaning. 14 years ago, this sanctuary was under the threat of purification by the last known listener Alazan Dupré, but they were barely spared. But now came a new listener and a new threat of purification, something that they wanted to avoid. You don't have the right to, Astrid said as she could barely stand and looked at Serana with anger. I am the leader of this sanctuary. I won't allow. Thud. The sanctuary shook again after another strike from the battering ram, making the looming danger seep through their hearts. Astrid, Serana spoke, while I am not as devout as Cicero, let me tell you who is the traitor here. It is the one who rejected the old ways, the one who fought against it and defied its tenets, the one who betrayed the supposed listener whom I impersonated and ratted them to Commander Morrow of the Penitus Oculatus, the one who led the agents of the Penitus Oculatus to this sanctuary. Serana's words marked all the wrongdoings Astrid committed. Having her sins revealed this way, Astrid faced the judgment of the Brotherhood in front of her family members. I protected this family, I picked them up when everything was lost, I kept things running, she said. And you did well, Serana replied with an assuring face, but you let your own greed take over and tarnished your sworn duty as a Dark Brotherhood assassin. To oblivion with that, Astrid shouted and tried to stand up, but she was too tired and injured. Sidhis wasn't going to help us. The Night Mother wasn't going to help either. All they demanded was absolute devotion and blind trust. You signed up for this, Serana said. You all did. But I didn't want to lose my life or my family, Astrid said in tears as she lowered her head. Thud. To be honest, I don't like any of this either. You chose the path of Sidhis and now you walk it to the end. I doubt there would be a happy ending within the void, but I am sure there is no bad ending either. Serana sympathized, offering some solace. Family can be what makes you strong, but it can also bring your downfall. She spoke of experience and pain. She wanted to have a family as well, but hers is something she could only make with her vampirism and power, the daughter of Coldharbour. While her plans behind John's back were for that family to grow stronger and more powerful, she had to pass the judgment on Astrid, who was struggling for the same goal as hers. Thud. Viezra and Armbjorn died to the one whom they chose to stand behind, and their sacrifice was necessary for the rise of the new listener, Serana said. Wait, Gabriella interrupted. Festus, is he alive? The wizard lives. Serana pointed to a nearby wall, and a shadow door formed that through an elderly Imperial crawled out of. Festus! Gabriella rushed at her friend and helped him to sit up as he seemed exhausted. From that shadow door, a small girl walked out following Festus. She was almost at the same height as Babette but showed older features. Her hair was black and her eyes were feline blue, with her ears growing on the top of her head like a cat. That is? Asked Nazir. The silencer of the listener. Performer of the purification. Serana replied. In other words, the one who killed Viezra and Armbjorn. No one looked at Nefertiti with good intentions at this moment, seeing how small she was. Killing two of their comrades is surely something they won't easily forgive, but they had no choice but to show some hostility. In response to that, Nefertiti transformed into a wercat for the first time in a long while, and her form was nothing short of diabolical. Thud. Those legionaries you brought won't stop, Astrid, Serana said. Only the listener can save us at this point. How? Astrid asked. He is outside the sanctuary. All he needs is an invitation, which only you can extend to him, as the matron of the sanctuary, Astrid. Call him. Serana said. I don't know, Astrid said, and in a glimmer of inspiration, she realized what had to be done. She looked back towards the sealed Night Mother coffin, and just knew what to do. She sat on her knees and lowered her head. She knew that to end this and prevent the Legion from destroying the sanctuary and the remaining assassins, she had to face the error of her ways. She had to contact the listener, and what better way to do so other than going directly to the Night Mother? Thud. The black door of the sanctuary wasn't going to fall, but what's at stake here was the sanctuary's integrity, as chunks of the cave system would start to collapse very soon at this rate by the look of the many cracks forming around the wall. I am ready, Astrid said. As she said so, Nefertiti returned to her human form, placed a few candles she had around Astrid, and handed her a pair of nightshade roses. Astrid stared at Nefertiti and wondered what kind of a mighty being has become the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, who will bring it to a new dawn through the abandoned old ways. Thud. I am sorry for what I have caused. Astrid spoke, as she rubbed her hand against her blade of woe with the petals of nightshade in hand. Damn it, Astrid! Nazir spoke in frustration. Girl. Festus was also sad to see Astrid reduced to that. It was then that it finally had to happen. Sweet mother, send your child upon me. For the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. And Astrid stabbed herself. It was then when the night mother's coffin opened and someone walked out. Sweet child, I hear you calling me, for the malice in your heart must be washed by void and sin. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.